Most searched for Pornhub games. Can I open this up? Okay. Oh, man. Oh, this is the year in review. They had a new one. So every single year, Pornhub puts out the most popular video game character, or the most popular video games that are searched on Pornhub. Number 1 is Fortnite. Well, the one thing that we know about Fortnite being number 1 is that everybody who's searching for it is over the age of 18. Let's look at number 2, Genshin Impact. The one thing that we know about Genshin Impact is that everybody searching for it is searching for characters that are... Actually, let's move on. Pokemon. Okay, the good thing we know about Pokemon is that everybody is searching for Pokemon for the trainers and not instead of for... Oh. Okay, so Overwatch, Minecraft, Resident Evil, League of Legends, Valorant, GTA 5, Sims 4, Cyberpunk, Mortal Kombat, Atomic Heart. Yeah, that was not really that popular. It was just those 2 robot girls. Fallout and Final Fantasy really popped off. So you've got, obviously, right there, you know, the Final Fantasy Rebirth with, like, the Tifa. Among Us is +6. I wouldn't have expected that. Anyway, let's see what the characters are. Chun-Li from Street Fighter or Fortnite. Lara Croft. Tifa. Do you want to know what's so fucking funny about this? I bet if you took these search results and you changed the year from 2024 to 2004, it would be the exact same top 3. Dude, it's been the same for fucking like 30 years? Lady Dimitrescu, yeah, what a surprise with Resident Evil. Sonic the Hedgehog. Mario. And what's this slime from Genshin Impact? What? There's something I'm not understanding about this. Well, there we go, guys. That is the 2024 year in review for Pornhub, with Fortnite, Genshin Impact, and Pokemon being the top 3 games.
Today we've got to talk about one of the biggest launches of the year, of course, Path of Exile 2, and how it's doing what Diablo 4 did not. And I bring that up as an angle not to bash Blizzard, right? That's not really the point. The point is that products cannot escape how they were made, or in this case, how they were shipped. Path of Exile 2 is a game that is getting so much right. It's managed to sidestep so much of what torpedoed Diablo 4's at least initial online sentiment, and when we go into the detail of the creation of these games, it gets even better. So this is a big one, an important one, and one that we're going to put in context, of course supported by today's sponsor. We're going to help you transform doom scrolling into skills you can be proud of, and for me, that means righting a little bit of a wrong from the past. It's brilliant.org/bellular news, and for me, they are a healthy, fulfilling habit. That's because they're all about learning by doing across thousands of lessons in maths, data science, programming, and AI, and it's all with their gorgeous site and app. And what sets them apart is just how tactile and interactive everything is, which is the complete opposite of the school system that I went through. I used to love science, but I just couldn't get engaged in advanced maths topics, actually. And to be honest, it's been a little bit of an insecurity, a bit of unfinished business, and that's why I'm enjoying their maths pathway, especially geometry. It's funny, spatial problem solving has always been like a little bit tricky for me, and of course that's where Brilliant's interactive visualizations are just perfect. It's a real good foundational skill, of course, the sort of thing that's useful across just everything, but it's so often not taught well, and of course this is just one pathway. Now personally, I use the app. I love the app's layout, the illustrations and the UX are just delightful. You can just feel the passion behind it, and it's nice making my phone something that works for me rather than distract me. So you can do the same. You can turn the doom scrolling into a daily learning habit today at brilliant.org/bellular news, where you'll get a 30-day free trial and 20% off an annual plan, which is something you won't regret. But first, we got to check in with the numbers. They are mighty. This is a hell of a success. So, Steam peaked with 578k players, placing this in the all-time top 20. It also beat Path of Exile 1's highest ever concurrency, which was 350k in July 2024. So yeah, old game, but no slouch. And of course, it's not even free to play yet. All of this represents at least $30 of revenue, so yes, this is a lot of money for the company. And through the weekend, it of course was topping Steam's bestseller list. But it's not only selling in Steam. As an example, my PC, well, it must have got access to my Twitter feed because my PC rapidly unalived itself, so I've been playing on PS5. It actually hit rank 6 on the PlayStation and Xbox stores, and much like Diablo 4, my god, this game feels amazing to play on the controller. It's incredible. Now, the launch was good and not good, but for good reason. Grinding Gear reached 1 million early access redemptions. Yeah, redemptions, there's a few little asterisks there that I'll get into later. They hit that before the launch, and they knew the servers would be a problem. They actually had way more success than they thought, than they forecasted, which is almost surprising to me. It just seems like this was inevitably going to be a humongous event. I guess they modeled for humongous and got double humongous. Anyway, the servers were completely rammed. A last-minute crash that hit the majority of users was found, so they delayed the launch, but eventually, the game came out, and just about all was well. Over on Twitch, while over 1 million people were watching, and even SteamDB broke. And that's pretty wild, because it was literally just people checking how the launch was doing. Let's talk about numbers and money, though. This is a little bit of bro math, but it actually does have a point. Path of Exile 2 is pulling higher than Helldivers 2 in terms of its concurrence on Steam. And whenever it's dipping down into the troughs, it still is over 200k. It's doing incredibly. Now, even, you look at Helldivers 2's launch, it's got its strange server problems that make the chart look really quite funny. But the point is, both are selling extremely well, and there are similar launch spikes. Now, Path of Exile 2 beat Helldivers 2 to the 1 million mark because it hit 1 million access codes redeemed before launch. Helldivers 2 took 3 days to hit 1 million sales. 6 weeks post-launch, Bloomberg reported 8 million Helldivers 2 sales, and by 12 weeks, we got a number of 12 million Helldivers 2 sales, with about 60% being in PC. Now, I don't think Path of Exile 2 will overall hit as broadly as Helldivers did, but I actually do bring it up for really for a reason here, for a point. Helldivers 2 was a surprise. That's why it was such a viral, word-of-mouth hit. And in many ways with Path of Exile 2, it's achieving the same. Grinding Gear Games had expectations for this. Those expectations were probably modeled off how many people were playing Path of Exile 1, right? But what we've seen is viral word of mouth carrying Path of Exile 2. And that's because, well, it's actually managed to do something that is altogether more ambitious, risky, and impressive. We live in a world where many games don't earn their marketing copy. Path of Exile 2 does, so it's billed as a next-generation ARPG. And it really is. See, here's the thing. I've realized I actually don't like ARPGs in the traditional sense. Once the sugar rush ends, I am just incapable of caring. The gear doesn't work for me. But Path of Exile 2 actually does click. Another one that clicked for me is No Rest for the Wicked. Both are refreshingly different action RPGs, and that's what Grinding Gear seems to have pulled off. And it's why I brought up Helldivers, because it was a big surprise, right? That's why it sold so much better than Arrowhead, even optimistically modeled. So whenever you hear a game being billed as, this is the Skyrim of that, or the Dark Souls of this, you often roll your eyes and think, oh, really? That's the... But no, in this case, actually, kind of is like that. Path of Exile 2 is slower. It's more methodical. It's got a dodge roll, and a dodge roll that feels pretty damn good. And that's allowed Grinding Gear to design the combat differently. It's slower, it's harder, it actually feels way more engaging and involved to me than just a big numbers go brrr. The actual feeling of skill and mastery is really there. That's why I'm continuing to play it. It's why I liked the bit of No Rest for the Wicked that I played. And most importantly for today, it's not what people tend to expect from the ARPG genre. And I've got to wonder if that positive word of mouth, people saying, yeah, this is an ARPG, but it's actually different. It's trying more. The boss fights are actually worth doing just for being good boss fights in a game. That is a type of word of mouth, and being ambitious with the design of this game that actually seems to be moving the needle, and making this hit harder than Grinding Gear even expected. And when we look at both it and Diablo 4 and try to learn lessons, it actually gets more interesting. Both are games that are basically channeling a hell of a lot of Diablo 2, and they are both games that try to slow the pace way down and amp up the meaning. That's what D4 tried to do with its launch, but, well, didn't really work that well. Now, there are many parts of D4 that I think are pretty excellent, but it didn't really land its design. And post-launch, it's basically succeeded by turning itself into a far more fast-paced game, essentially borrowing lessons from Diablo 3, which means that, yeah, there is a new Diablo game to play, but it's not really one that's daring, that's next generation, right? Whereas here, Path of Exile 2, it has also tried to be a little bit slower, a little bit more methodical, but it's actually managed to stick the landing and succeed, and that is a humongous achievement. And in the biggest picture, that's because, let's just say you're somebody who loved Elden Ring, and tens of millions of people are in that category. Well, Diablo 4 would have very little to offer you. They do not play any way similar. Path of Exile 2 can credibly target that market and get non-ARPG grinders in. And that means that this could truly expand the genre. I don't want to shock you, but expectations sort of do matter. And while expectations for this were high, it was also well built to handle things not being perfect. Diablo 4 launched at a big full premium price, with, of course, a premium early access on top of that. And that meant that players were rightly scathing whenever things just did not feel that well thought out. PoE 2, though, is overtly an early access game, right? That's the whole point. And the core of it kind of just goes like this. The world is rich. Big Diablo 2 vibes. It's immersive. It's dense. The gameplay is absolutely outstanding. The bosses are refreshingly outstanding for the genre, unlike, say, Diablo 4, where a lot of people were kind of disappointed by that. And then, of course, there's Path of Exile's home turf, Buildcraft. Frankly, it terrifies me. It's nearly limitless, but it's that in a way that's all about the player, freedom, and expression. Just looking at clips, looking at GIFs on Twitter, the amount of cool shit that people are building is genuinely kind of inspiring. However, it does share one thing with Diablo 4, and that is not a lot of praise for loot. For now, what I understand is basically, whenever you level up, the vendors will refresh, and actually quite often you'll be getting your better sources of gear from those vendors, at least in the earlier level up flow. And it's kind of funny because D4 got loot wrong with launch. But, right, the thing that matters here the most is the core gameplay and the buildcraft, and those absolutely seem to be outweighing the loot concerns. Plus, it's early access. That means players have got reasonable expectations. Right now, the game has got half of its campaign. You basically complete it again in hard mode, and then you're into the end game. And it's even funny the way that happened, because Path of Exile 2 initially started off in 2019 as a new campaign for Path of Exile. Basically, things escalated, and now we're here. And by the time they hit 2024, they realized something. Well, we shouldn't do the rest of the campaign right now. We need to do a launch with a full-ass endgame. And that's exactly what they did. Here's a quote from them. This is them talking about their recent development. Part of what we're trying to do with early access is get the game right, and I think that if we had scaled endgame down, then we wouldn't really be getting the true reflection of what the game would be. And that, folks, is the kicker, the big thing. Diablo 4 did not have any of that, and I again do not say this to bash Blizzard developers. Seriously, I don't. Most people are good and want to do good, and as developers, they would have killed for a launch like Path of Exile 2, one that had reasonably set expectations, that wasn't asking for so much money even though core parts of the game were kind of ill thought out, one that's basically designed to make the game over time as best as it can be for their players with their players. And even sticking within ARPGs, we have another success story from this year and last epoch. It did just that. But for the biggest picture, we need to look at another game that's similar in a way, and that's Baldur's Gate 3. Obviously, totally different games, but it released with just a fraction of its content in early access, and that gave Larian the finances, feedback, and the time that they needed to make what is easily one of the world's best ever role-playing games. And why? Well, because that was slowly made with their community over time. And that is exactly what Grinding Gear have set themselves up to do here. Of course, like Larian, their one thing, their literal mission of the company is ARPGs. And that gets me to the real point. Larian and Grinding Gear had experience and control. What did Blizzard Entertainment have? They had scale, chaos, pressure, and misery. So whenever I say that you should care about how your games are made, this is why. Because we want them to actually be good. Diablo 4 is a really strange project. It started off as an over-the-shoulder action game, then it was rebooted, and then all spare resources were poured into finishing the damn thing. All, of course, to hit its big release target. And from the CEO's vantage point, it of course worked. D4 was an astounding success, one of the games of all time, the fastest-selling Blizzard game in history. 12 million players within 2 months. And of those millions, how many purchased the far more expensive Early Access Edition? Probably quite a few. I mean, within 6 days, it generated $666 million of revenue, and that, folks, is stonks. Leaks suggest $1 billion in revenue by September 2024, with $150 million coming from microtransactions up to that point. Yet, through a lot of that time span, the players were not happy. Even though those amazing numbers were there, the game was clearly not ready. core systems did not stand to reason. Their foundational gameplay hypothesis of an open world full of objectives that you would basically re-clear every season was almost immediately proven to be wrong and boring. I mean, basically it was saying, would you like the structure of an Ubisoft game and every season you can clear the map again? No, obviously that was never going to work. Fundamental aspects of itemization were broken. Now, credit where it's due. The Diablo 4 team have actually busted their asses to fix as many parts of that game as they could. But the point is, they could have delayed that game, and we could have got a Diablo 4 that was substantially better and that dodged so many of those player concerns. But we didn't get that. Again, $666 million of revenue in 6 days. They obviously needed to ship it when they were going to ship it, and with a scale like that, the dev team are not the people who are making the calls. They're not calling the shots. This game, Path of Exile 2, is early access. Right now, it costs under half the price of D4's base edition. And on top of that, many longtime Path of Exile players got it for free. And the way that worked is pretty neat. If you've ever purchased a top edition supporter pack, or if you've spent over the lifetime of your account $480, you get access to it. This matters. That is actually goodwill. That is money from some of their players with the deepest pockets that they just sort of said, nah, we'll just give it to you. Keep on playing Path of Exile. They've also ensured that they're not, like, killing PoE 1. PoE 1 was amazingly supported for years and years and years and years, building up goodwill. Meanwhile, with Blizzard, what happened? Well, Diablo 3 Reaper of Souls was, kind of killed in the grave. They sort of abandoned expansions when they actually could have got lots of success there. The point isn't that one team is perfect and the other one makes nothing but mistakes. No, in both cases, you've got developers who will make mistakes and will want to learn from their launch. With Diablo 4, it is a humongously staffed behemoth that is rigid, hard to move, and is not under that team's explicit control. With Path of Exile, they've overtly planned for open development. Now, sure, the network team may have needed some crisis meetings, and yeah, we're seeing totally busted combos being nerfed, but nothing close to the, oh dear, our foundational design hypothesis that we basically didn't beta test at all appears to be wrong and the players are not happy. Which is what would have happened inside Blizzard, and must have stung. And that's the power of designing for early access. No rushing to hit the quarterly earnings, quite the opposite. PoE 2 was in fact delayed. See a lot of that account stuff, microtransactions and everything? Well, the game was delayed because they basically had to re-architect all of their server and account stuff to make that work because, there's like shared microtransactions. And the games are going to be running concurrently as well. Grinding Gear No, the PoE 2, is different in a way that some people will not like. That actually means that PoE 2 has a reason to exist, unlike a certain other sequel from a certain other company that's probably in both of our minds right now. But that's not the final point. We're going to have to talk about scale because the numbers here, I don't want to say they're shocking, but my god, do they prove a point. If you go onto LinkedIn right now, you will see that Grinding Gear Games have got between 51 and 200 employees. Quickly Googling around, I've seen it being reported as like 140, 150, and I'm sure there will be more people in the credits, like outsourcing and stuff. But that's a fraction of the Diablo team. In fact, right, I have it from sources as of last year. The Diablo was the single largest game team at Blizzard Entertainment. And at one point, I know World of Warcraft, in and around that time, was about 550 people. So you likely had north of 600 as the core dev team of Diablo 4. And that comes out as a bit of a troubled project, even though it sells a lot, makes money up front. We then look at this game, a game that is not burdened by having to find work for 600 to 1,000 people to do. Because, what the hell? How are you going to make a game that way that's actually good and crafted? Okay, I'm going to play a lot more Path of Exile. We will keep you up to date in this story, because it's one of the good ones. And sticking with good ones, watch this next. It's really fun. It's basically GOG giving a big slap back to Blizzard and winning so much free PR. I think you'll find it fun.
All right, I'm going to start this off by just saying I feel pretty confident that this is probably the most valuable video you probably will have ever watched in regards to game development and specifically virality. Virality probably just about in any regard, but especially obviously in regards to video games. Today we're going to be talking about a retention study of 100 gameplay videos that I did, logged over 400 data points, and that allowed me to identify like 24 specific gameplay features that have very predictable effects on viewer retention. As kind of a quick intro here, so after I released Choo Choo Charles, I realized, you know, there's gotta be a handful of game mechanics that have some kind of specific effects on retention, because I'd been doing YouTube, I'd been doing you know, devlogs and stuff, and I was aware that, like, okay, there are certain things that you say and it will increase your retention. There are certain things you say and it decreases your retention. There are certain things that you can do that'll cause people to re-watch parts of the video and increase retention that way. And so I was like, you know, within the context of actual gameplay, there's probably a lot of things that do have significant impacts on retention and thus also on virality, right? Because the higher the retention, the more views a video gets. That's how YouTube works. So the no commentary gameplay channel Alpha Beta Gamer was willing to give me access to their back-end channel stats. And so if you're not familiar, they do a lot of it's a large channel. It's one of the largest like indie no commentary channels. A lot of it is horror stuff, but they've got a bunch of other random things as well. And in the retention study, I tried to grab as many games as I could that were coming from just in different genres, all kinds of random stuff, to get a wide-ish data set, as wide as I could. That is what we're going to be talking about. So as a couple of kind of prerequisites, a little bit of homework, because here's the deal. This is going to be a big video. This is a long video. I'm probably going to have to film it in a couple of sittings. But also, if you want to have a decent chance of kind of following along, you should, I mean, ideally, you should just watch all the other videos on this channel, especially the stuff in the Everything in Order playlist, but especially the videos on instinct, video on what triggers a game to go viral, and the video on what entertainment is. Those three specific videos will give you a decent foundation, but again, ideally, you'd watch all the other stuff. And I should also mention, this is, if you really want to apply this stuff, you're probably going to have to watch through this a handful of times. Hey, that's me increasing retention. Yeah. But I am serious. Here's the deal. Like, all the stuff on this channel, I don't want people to think that they can just, like, watch one of these videos and then just be like, oh, I watched all the videos, but my games still suck. It's like, yeah, you got to, like, actually understand what I'm talking about here. So just watching through this is not going to make you have a game with 20 billion views. Okay, that's not really how it works. You have to actually understand what I'm talking about here. So again, going through those prerequisite videos will help. That'll get you a solid foundation. And yeah, so all right, next thing. So basically, here's the deal. If you want to make a game that has that reaches a mass audience, right, you need to go viral. Okay, it is possible to make, you know, obviously a very profitable game off of, let's say, word of mouth or off of the Steam algorithm and some things like that. Yes, you can do that, but if you can go viral and get 20 billion views, you might as well, right? So, you know, virality in social media, YouTube, Twitch, TikTok, all this stuff, it's the easiest way to get in front of a global audience. And then from there, it's like once you've got like kind of like the mass like number of people, then they can take it on a word of mouth basis and kind of get into those like IRL corners of the world that you would have a more difficult time reaching, right? There's a lot of people that don't watch YouTube. There's tons of people who don't watch YouTubers. They hate it. They find it annoying. They find it obnoxious. But their friend who watches YouTube might find out about a cool game, and then they tell their friends that don't watch YouTube, right? So ideally, you need both word of mouth and mass virality, ideally. So that's why this is useful. So basically, as kind of a quick summary of some of those prerequisite videos, if a game is being played by YouTubers and that game is not getting as many views as they would normally get, people aren't really going to continue playing it, and it's not going to catch fire. If people are playing it and that video is performing above average, you know, let's say they're getting twice as many views as they normally would on their channel, they're going to say, oh, wow, I should keep making content about this. Maybe their friends will start making content about it. More people will start making content about it. Here's the deal. When YouTubers get views, they get money. So it's like, if your game is a gold mine, people are going to mine it, right? You don't have to ask them to. You don't have to beg people to. You don't have to pay them to. You're paying them indirectly by giving them a game that will earn them more money. Large YouTubers, they're good at editing. They've got engaging personalities. They know how to kind of get the most out of a game and make it appeal to their audience, but only to an extent, right? Most YouTubers are not skilled enough to take a lot of the crappy games that get released on Steam. They're not going to make a viral video out of that. They're not going to make money off of it, okay? So ideally, your game would be helping content creators make better content, right? You're not going to be getting in the way with weird stuff, with weird mechanics, with mechanics that are hurting their retention. And ideally, you will give them a tool to create good content. And if you do that successfully, then you can kind of spawn this tidal wave of content. Kind of like I mentioned, one of the key ways that you would have control over this is through retention. Most social media sites, most of the video ones, specifically I'd say like YouTube and TikTok, but other platforms as well, they promote content that has really, really high retention rates. This is basically just how much percentage or how much time, or both really combined, they're taking both into account. How much time are people spending watching a specific piece of content? If people are watching it for 10 seconds, that content's probably not going very far. If they're watching it for 20 minutes, well, now you're going to get 50 million views, or you know, whatever it might be. Retention rate is very, very important, and we have a lot of control over that as game developers. Firstly, I'm going to give you kind of just the overall basis of how retention works. Again, this is kind of gone into on other videos, but basically the way that you keep somebody engaged is by working towards a goal, right? You have a goal, you have a conflict, you have a problem, you have a puzzle, and you are actively working towards solving it, and you're demonstrating progress towards that goal throughout the video. And what that is essentially doing is that people are they're sort of living vicariously through you, and they get to feel as though they are solving a problem, as though they are accomplishing a goal. So you're kind of taking people on a journey through accomplishment, right? You're giving them a sense of accomplishment. The way that this works in practice, I'll give my devlog template, for example. So basically, in like the first 5 seconds of a video, I try to explain the overall conflict, the overall story of the video. It's like, okay, what goal am I trying to accomplish? So it might be, there's no enemies in the game, and that's awful because I need enemies in a game, okay? And then next I'm giving a little bit of context, like for the next maybe like 10 or 15 seconds. Some additional context so that people understand, again, they understand the full scope of like, what is the goal? What are we accomplishing? And then in the next like 45 seconds, 60 seconds, I try and make rapid progress towards that goal, right? It's like, okay, look, we're doing stuff. We're getting stuff done. We want to show immediately that we're doing something. That immediately gives people this feeling that we are working towards this goal. And then this is something that I don't know exactly how you would incorporate this into games, but just, again, from like an overall retention standpoint, then I'll like throw in a twist or like some kind of additional challenge, sort of something that makes it a little bit more multi-dimensional. Like, for example, if I'm working on enemy AI, maybe 60 seconds in, I reveal that there's some other entire really difficult feature for the AI that I need to add that I've never done before, and I don't know how to do it. Something like that, right? So, and then the rest of the video, what you're doing is you are showing progress towards the goal. You are interrupting that progress with additional, like, kind of like intermediate conflicts. And actually, I've got a graph for this. I'll just pull this up on screen. This is the graph here. This is basically what it looks like. This is how I outline it. Obviously, here's the deal. I'm not Mr. Beast. If you were to ask him, I'm sure he'd give you a much better explanation. But ultimately, you've got your main timeline of your video, where you've got your overarching goal. and some intermediate goals. And then you have constant reminders of how close you are, right? It's like, oh, we're about halfway there. You know, it's like, think about when you're on a car ride and you're like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? How close are we? Right? We want to know where we are on this spectrum. You can think of it like almost like a progress bar. This is why progress bars are on everything, loading screens and all that stuff, right? Because we want to see how close are we. So that's kind of a basic look at retention. Essentially, it's like if people lose interest in something when they can't see the direction that they are heading, or they can't see progress towards that direction. An unengaging video is going to be one that feels kind of aimless. It lacks direction. It lacks progress. If you're just accomplishing a task and then accomplishing a task and then accomplishing a task towards no really identifiable end, it's going to be unengaging. It's like in a scenario like that, you might as well just be listing off a random array of numbers. Just like 1, 8, 45, 109, 8,504. Like, you're just doing stuff and it's not going anywhere. That is kind of the basis of what all of retention is kind of being built on. And I think you'll kind of see as we get into all these specific features, you'll start to see kind of how that lines up. First thing that we're going to hop into are features that harm retention. So the first feature that's going to harm your retention, and actually I should also mention real quick, so keep in mind this study was done on no commentary gameplay videos, okay? Usually, I mean, here's the deal. Most people are going to be watching content about your game in the context of commentated and edited gameplay videos, okay? There's a person up in the corner with a face cam, and there's goofy edits, and there's subtitles and all that stuff. So naturally, retention is going to be better, and some of these things might become less of an issue. So that's just something to keep in mind. So the main menu, this is one of these things that on a commentated video, this probably won't be as big of a retention sink. But essentially, you can lose 30 to 50% of your viewers on a bad menu screen. Now, here's the deal. Obviously, I'll kind of show you. I should pull up a chart so I can kind of draw what some of these things would look like. In the beginning of a video, naturally you're going to see your menu screen, but also retention naturally dips a lot by potentially 30 to 50% at the beginning of any video. On my devlogs, the retention dips a ton right in the beginning. So that's it. This is, again, this first point doesn't mean the most and isn't insanely valuable, but I have seen examples where retention is not nearly as affected by the menu screen, on menu screens that were more interesting and more interactive. What retention is usually going to look like on a YouTube video is it's going to look like this. It's going to go down, and then it kind of levels off a bit, and then it kind of goes along, and then you get to the end, right? So during your menu screen, you're going to see this, right? You're seeing massive retention drop off. In a lot of examples, the retention drop ceases basically as soon as the game starts. As soon as the player takes control of the character, that's when the retention stops dropping quite so dramatically. This was an insanely consistent dip that was logged. This is an example here where at point G, right here, the player was sitting on the main menu, but then they started moving their mouse towards the play button. And so they were just sitting on the menu, and then they start moving slowly towards the play button, and then retention starts to hold. Main menu. Ultimately, retention will consistently drop until the gameplay actually starts, so any time spent on your main menu will cost you. Especially in a no commentary setting, but less in others. You can easily lose 30 to 50% of your viewers to a bad menu on no commentary. Again, I made a note on this. To mitigate this, you'd either need to have a really interesting animated or interactive main menu so that, or make it so that the player controls the character to navigate the menu. Now that one, I'm not sure if that's really a good way to do it, because you need to teach people what the game is. It means you would have to like start the game like in a tutorial or something. It just seems a little bit messy, but I think having a nice animated or interactive menu would help. So next thing are player deaths. Essentially, every single time that the player in your game dies, you will lose retention because you were working towards, you were making progress, you were going, and then all of a sudden it's cut short. It's cut short, and now it's like that tension is all released, and people are like, oh, dang it. And now they feel defeated, and they're more likely to leave the video. Generally, what I see with player deaths is around 6 to 15% dips. But there is a little bit more to get into here. So oftentimes, player deaths are especially hurting retention because they're followed by very long game over screens. And here I specifically noted, sometimes you've got a game over screen that's 20 to 60 seconds. Of like, you've got your game over screen, and then it's followed by a loading screen, and then it's followed by 20 seconds of retreading ground to get back to where you previously were, or sometimes even longer. And of course, they also cause this jarring break in flow and progress. To fix this, I think it would be best to try to find ways to make player deaths as infrequent as possible, and make respawns as close to instant as possible. Try and cut out as many menus or long animations or long loading screens, and respawn players in such a way that they're exactly where they left off or don't need to backtrack over things that they've already done. I think I also made some other specific points on backtracking and how bad that is for retention. Deaths, it can also be less literal. There were some examples of, for example, kart racing games where you'd be racing the cart and then you'd like go off the track into like the water, and it'd have to play a respawn animation, and you'd see a dip of like 5%. So let's see if we can find a couple examples of some of these. All right, so this one is an example of a 13% dip. This is point B right here. Let me scroll down. Right here. Might be difficult to see. Big dip. And this is on a death during a horror game. So, player just died, and now this long death screen is popping up, and people are leaving the video. And then I think it probably levels off again, probably around the point where that death screen ends. But yeah, so that's an example of that one. Let's find a couple other ones here. Okay, here's an example of like a sort of a kart racing one. This is a 6% dip on point B right here. So we're going along, kind of a steady decline, and then there's a sharp dip right at this point here, right? We fall off the edge, and this is even a really quick, this was a quick respawn. This was a really quick respawn, but even then, you've got 6% of people leaving, or 6% of people who were originally watching. It's actually more than 6% of the people who were watching at that point in the video, because retention is already down to about 33%. So it's actually closer to, what would that be, like a 15% dip? Is that right? I don't know if my math is mathing, but it would be something like that. So those are some good examples of kind of what that looks like. So next one. Oh, actually, also, another quick note. Jump scare deaths. Jump scare deaths in horror games are a little bit different. But jump scares is a specific point later on that we'll get into. So next one, level and match completion. So level-based games are something that you have to be a little bit careful about, because each individual level inherently, it's like it acts as its own goal, right? So you start a level, you have a goal, you complete it, and now people feel a sense of completion, and they're more inclined to leave the video and not stick around for the future levels. Let's say you've got a video where you're doing 3 rounds of a game or 3 levels. Let's say you're doing 3 rounds of Fortnite. Every time that a round of Fortnite ends, there's probably going to be a slight dip. Every time a round of Among Us ends in a video, there's going to be a slight dip, because people want to stick around until they see the current goal that they're fixated on. They want to see it completed. So level completions usually cause 3 to 10% dips. They're pretty much the most common and consistent type of dip logged during this study. The factors that contribute to the severity of the dips are the length of the level transition and how heavy the sense of completion is. There are some games where it's like shorter levels and there isn't like a super clear goal that's being defined. So the dips are thus less, maybe closer to like that 3%. But if it's like slightly longer matches, let's say maybe 10 minutes, and the ending has been really hyped up, as soon as that ends, so something like Among Us and Fortnite, I think would be good examples of ones that would have these larger dips. But also the win screens, in like puzzle games, if you've got, you finish the level and then you've got 10 seconds of loading screen and menus and stuff, that's not good for retention. Obviously, again, in commentated videos, things like this will probably be cut out. But if somebody's, let's say, live streaming, that's the other thing that you got to keep in mind is a live stream is going to probably line up more closely with a lot of this data than most commentated videos. Because, again, in a live stream, you can't cut out the loading screen. You just got to sit through it. I think the best scenario, and this is kind of, again, this is one of these points of nuance. You've got the option to avoid level or match-based games and go for something that's more like sandboxy or more open-ended that allows people to come up with their own goal, right? So you could create a video that's based around a specific goal that you've set, and you can end it as soon as you've completed that goal. Like in Minecraft, let's say you're like, hey guys, in today's video, this day, we're going to go and mine diamonds, and we're going to make a whole full suit of diamond armor. And however long that takes is how long it takes, and you can end the video once you've completed that goal, which is going to be better for retention. But it can also be good to have match-based games because it gives anybody who plays it this inherent goal, right? You're giving them the goal. You're giving them the stakes. You have a little bit more control over the structure of the retention and how well the game will retain viewers. So there's a trade-off. I think that I think if you wanted a game, man, it's kind of tough, right? It's kind of tough. I think ultimately Sandbox is going to give you more potential for longevity, but it's going to be more difficult because it puts more of the burden on YouTubers to structure a really interesting and captivating video, and you don't really have any say on it. So it's just things that you gotta weigh. Like for me, I'm doing Cuff Bust. Cuff Bust is round based because I think I think it works in this scenario, but worth considering. But regardless, your level transitions should ideally be as quick and streamlined as possible. Long win animations or score completion time statistics all negatively affect the retention. Ideally, you'd just say, hey, you won, hey, you lost, make it quick, make it snappy, and move on to the next thing and get that new goal in front of people as soon as possible. Another note I made is that it could be useful to, like, if you're doing round-based stuff, maybe instead of having like a bunch of 5-minute rounds, you could lengthen them to now maybe you've got like fewer rounds per video, but they're like 20 or 30 minutes long or something, so that way you could fit a single round into a video so that you're not getting those multi-match dips. This is a very subtle one, and this is 4 minutes into the video. Another thing worth noting, basically, the further into a video you are, the lower the percentages are for the dips, because just, once you're 90% of the way through a video or halfway through the video, most people are there to stay. But here at halfway through, there was a fairly distinct 2% dip. It might be a little bit difficult to see in the video here, but 2% for a player completing a level, and then they're shown these statistics. They then continue. They then continue. Maybe it's loading. Yeah, so that's a 2% dip. Yeah, here's one. This is for point A right here. This dip. This is an 8%. This is a player completing. They've just completed the first level of the game. And I guess that was it. Level completion was probably right here. And again, this was a very quick transition, but you're still seeing a bit of an effect. Next up are notes. Notes are going to be most common in your story-based games or horror games. Pretty much every game is throwing story out there, and they're trying to throw lore in and all this stuff, but it's actually not good for retention. If you're implementing your notes incorrectly, you're probably going to see a 2 or 3% dip, but there have been a couple examples that I saw that were really atrocious where there was a 6% dip. There are a lot of examples of well-implemented notes that didn't cause any dips, so I'm going to go through kind of what the main differences are. So basically, notes are worst for retention when they are very long, right? So multiple paragraphs, a big, like if I've got like this much text, 3 sentences, 4 sentences or more, holy, that's going to be awful for retention. Okay, the more text there is, the less people want to see it. And the sooner in the game that they appear, the worse it will be for retention. So if you open up your game and 30 seconds in, you pick up a note and it's 2 paragraphs long, people are going to go, oh, no, not one of these, and they're going to leave, okay? But there are notes that don't impact retention, and these ones they're going to be really short. I'm talking like 1 sentence, 2 sentences, maybe just a few words in nice, big, legible text. Oftentimes they'd have like pictures on them or drawings, and ideally they're also placed later in the game, like past the first 3 minutes. If you're past the first 3 minutes of the video or the game, your notes are short, they're visual, then you're probably not going to be causing any issues here. I think the main issue with notes is that they're kind of interrupting progress, especially when it's really early in the video, when progress should be fastest. Progress should be fastest the sooner you are in the game and in the video. So, I think ideally it's best to just avoid using notes entirely, but if you need to, try and just keep them short, visuals and text, and place them a little bit later in the game, right? Try and put it off for a little bit. As well as, another note here, just, again, keeping the font size large enough so that people that are watching on a phone, because again, most people are not, heck, the font size right here is probably pretty illegible. I would assume a lot of people that are watching this video are maybe watching it on a phone. But, most people, they're watching on something small like this, and they can't read the tiny text. So, something to keep in mind. Next up, kind of similar, is expo dumps. Again, this is kind of in the story realm of things. Actually, I take that back. We're going to go back to notes. I'm going to show you some examples. Okay, notes. Let's find some of these here. Okay, this one is point A. This is in the first, what is this? Probably like the first minute and a half. We've got a 3% dip as the player picks up a notebook that has a paragraph of text on screen for some time. Okay, let's take a look at this one. Yeah, this is at 1 minute and 2 seconds. This is what we pick up. And there's a 2% dip off of this. So, yeah, we just walk over, pick it up, and everybody goes, well, not everybody. A few percent of people go, nope, I'm good. This is from the same game, just a little bit later. This is a second note. This is at 2 minutes in. And again, we get a 2% dip. Let's find some more. Okay, this is a pretty atrocious one here. This is a 6% dip, although it does seem to be coming after a... Oh, wait, no, never mind. I was looking at point C. This is point B. Point B right here. So we got a slight 2% dip. For some reason, why is this marked as 6%? This is very clearly not a 6% dip. This is probably more like... Oh, actually, it might be because it's probably dipping from here all the way down to here. Would be my guess. That's probably why I logged it like that. Okay, we got this big long note on screen. This is at 57 seconds into the game, and it just stays on the screen. Now, again, in a commentated video that's edited and there's somebody reading it aloud, these dips will probably be less significant, but again, taking the base data, no commentary, with less bias, it's something to keep in mind. Okay, here's another. This is a wild one. This is 12%. This is 12% at 1 minute into the video. Player picks up a note to read. This is point A. This is this dip right here. There was also point C, which was sort of a hold. I guess we'll get into that stuff more later. But we do have a very significant dip that dips and continues dipping until the player puts down the note. I bet I'm losing retention right now because this note is on screen. we've seen enough of that. You get the point. All right, now on to expo dumps. All right, so long exposition, monologues, dialogues can cause 3 to 10% dips, okay? Similar to notes, the longer they are and the sooner in the game that they take place, the worse the dip will be. Small moments, but it also depends on what the content of the conversation is, which we'll probably get into a bit more later when it comes to some other stuff. But okay, so small moments of monologue that last, let's say, 3 to 5 seconds. I never really saw any examples of it causing dips in retention in those scenarios, especially if it's placed after the first few minutes of gameplay, like notes. But you kind of start entering this risky territory with these 15 plus second expo dumps. The dips are also made worse when there's no voice acting. Again, in commentated videos, it kind of acts as voice acting, so that might help mitigate it. Or when there's nothing else going on outside of the expo dump, like let's say you start talking to an NPC and now you're just locked into conversation with the NPC and you can't do anything else. But if you're able to still walk around and stuff, then that seemed to help it as well. So to optimize exposition, keep things short, add voice acting, have either like an active cutscene like I mentioned here, or allowing players to, I mentioned here as well, to continue moving around. And ideally hold off on long exposition until a few minutes into the game. You know, if there's certain stuff in, like, let's say a tutorial that you need to get across, try and do it quickly, very short, and try and keep the player active. You know, just like kind of like sprinkle it in. It's like, oh, you need to learn how to interact with items. Okay, quick little thing right here. Oh, you need to learn how to jump. Oh, quick little thing right there, you know. I'll find a couple examples of these. Okay, this is point A right here, this big dip. This is a long expo dump monologue from an NPC that people are skipping past. Interesting note, the way the timing works out, 1 10-second skip still puts you on the first monologue, and a second skip puts you past a brief gameplay segment right to another monologue. It's also worth noting that not everyone skipped forward. Over 6% just left the video entirely. So that's why there's a this is an interesting one, right? So there's this really weird bump, this C point right here. And I was trying to figure out why on earth there was this bump. And it's because when you're on YouTube, when you double click to skip, or it used to be 10, I think very recently they might have changed it to 5 seconds. And so it seemed like that might have been what this bump was being caused by. But in any case, we see this dip here, which is long expo dump. So it looks like this. We're going through the level, and now we've got this character, and we start talking with them, and people are not interested. They want to see more of the actual game. It's just not engaging. Okay, this is a 6% dip here. This is on point B. This is right here. So it was kind of already on a slight decline, but you could see it declines a bit more sharply, and then it levels off after. I would assume this is after the expo dump, but we'll take a look at this. This is a 6% dip. Also, this is occurring at, what is this? 3 minutes in, actually. But you can see we're not remaining very active. This is 2D. There's no cutscene, obviously no voice acting, and we're just kind of sitting, looking at text. I know you're all bored. Probably 6% of you. All right, anyways. So that is what expo dumps look like. Next up, backtracking. This is one that we kind of briefly mentioned a little bit before that kind of oftentimes ties in with player deaths. So backtracking, you're going to see dips of maybe around 3 to 6%. There was one fringe example that was a 10% dip. Backtracking usually happens when a player has died and respawned at a checkpoint. Usually, like, if it's over 10 seconds from where they were killed and are respawning, and it's requiring them to replay some stuff, that's when you're most commonly going to see this. Dips like this can also happen if the player goes down, like, let's say, a long dead-end path, and then they have to retrace their steps and go back through the environment that they've already been through. Some of this can be fixed by simply applying the strategies mentioned on point B, player deaths. Again, you know, if you keep your respawns to a minimum, respawn players as close to where they died as possible, things like that, then that would help retention. And also keep in mind, I'm not saying that this is like how, like 100% sure, like how you should design your game, because a lot of these things that are good for retention act against the actual player experience. Not all of them, but some of them. Like, for example, I mean, usually people don't like backtracking, but if you need to, let's say, punish your player or something for messing up and you need them to backtrack a little bit, or the way that your save system is programmed means it's just not possible to do something like this, then you might just need to ignore this point and just say, hey, this is one of these features that I'm going to have to take a slight loss on, but maybe I can make it up in some other area. You know, you need to be weighing all this stuff carefully. Don't just take this and be like, oh, well, I guess I can't have respawning, blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, that's not what I'm saying. It's just, it's something to consider. Something to consider. See if you can fit it into your design. See if there are creative ways that you can design your game. Like in Cuff Bust, for example, there's no death. There's no death in Cuff Bust, and there's no, like, for example, you can hinder people's progress. You can mess them up. You can knock people out, but then they revive after like 5-10 seconds. Even when they're knocked out, they can still look around. They can still talk. If you get handcuffed, which is kind of the Cuff Bust equivalent of death, you can still run around. You can still talk to your friends, and you can get uncuffed, right? And you can uncuff yourself as well. There are ways to do that. And so that's how I'm getting around player deaths. At least hopefully. You know, we'll see how it works in practice, but that's part of it. You know, another good example is being downed in video games. In a lot of games, you get downed, you don't immediately die, especially in like multiplayer team-based stuff. And that's good for retention, not only in the context of videos and live streams, but it also is good for like actual player retention. The people that are actually playing your game, it will make it more engaging if you're not immediately out. So yeah, that was just a note that I wanted to mention there. So backtracking, let's pull up a few examples here. Okay, this is one example. This is point A right here, slight dip, nothing crazy. It's somewhere around 4%. The note here that I have is that the player dies and respawns, and the player isn't technically backtracking, but it looks like they are. So this is at 58 seconds in. I guess you'd probably need to see the earlier parts of this video to kind of fully understand, but whatever. We'll find a better example. Okay, this seems like a good one. This one seems, yeah, this is definitely a good example. Okay, this is a 10% dip. This is a minute in. This is this point A dip here, this big crater. So the player dies and has to restart the game. They're backtracking over a bunch of already seen content. During this minute, there's a whole minute of backtracking here. There's a deep dip in retention where many people have skipped. So not all of them have left. It seems like a lot of people are simply skipping ahead in this case. But
he was my best friend.
Yeah, so we've just lost. And then we go back to the menu, and it's just retreading the exact same stuff that we saw in the beginning. This one is a 3% dip at D. This is a very subtle one. Very subtle one. But we've gone down a hall to this area here, and we realize, oh, we actually can't go through there. So then we have to go back and I believe get like a torch or something. So we have to go back, walking slowly, and there's a slight dip. It's, in this case, it's probably just people skipping ahead because it looks like the retention does. It kind of pops back up. It's just a very, very minor dip in this case. Probably wasn't a lot of backtracking. It's probably like 5 seconds. We got point B here. This looks like a slightly better example. You can see this slight dip. This is around 5%. This is the player dying and respawning, and they have to replay a whole level, which comes out to around 20 seconds of backtracking. So they've just died, and they're restarting the level. That's pretty self-explanatory. Next up, credit scenes. Credits are a pretty simple one. but it's also one that you might not need to. It's one that you can take moderately seriously, depending on the kind of game that you're making. Ultimately, here's the deal. As soon as the credits roll, people are like, oh, okay, the game is over. All right, the game is done. There's nothing else to see here. And so people start leaving in droves, okay? Any viewers that you have left, they are going to immediately start dropping off as soon as your credits start. So ideally, you would keep your credits short if you're putting your credits in at all. You know, ideally, you'd probably just put your credits behind like a button on your menu screen. But if you really want to have an end credit sequence, don't try to make it longer. Don't try to inflate it. I've seen some developers that try and inflate their credit scenes to make it look like it was a bigger production and more impressive. Don't do that. It's not good for retention. It's also worth noting that you should not put anything important after your credits. Okay, if you've got a post-credit scene, this is something that I did in Choo Choo Charles. If you've got something that you actually want everybody to see, put it before your credits. Because again, once the credits hit, everybody starts leaving, and then you're going to be left with a fraction of that for the people who are actually going to see the post-credit stuff. You know, it's also worth noting that since naturally the credit scene of a game is going to be at the end, the retention drop-off isn't going to affect the overall view duration of a video as significantly as some of these other dips. You know, even if, like, let's say you're losing 30% of your viewers on the credit scene, it's probably not going to affect things as much as maybe a 10% dip on an expo dump that was really early in the video, right? Because since it's happening at the very, very end, the way that it averages out isn't going to be quite as significant. Also, you know, the length of your credits and the length of the game. Like, let's say you've got a game jam game, something super, super short. It's like a 5-minute game, and then you've got like a 1-minute credit sequence. Like, that's going to have a significant impact on the retention. But if you've got like a 2-hour game and you've got like a 20-second credits sequence at the end, like, that's not really going to affect anything super negatively. But again, if you're trying to optimize everything as well as possible, just don't have a credit sequence. Just put it behind a button on your menu. Lots of games do that. That's what I'm doing for Cuff Bust. It'd be weird to put it anywhere else in a game like that anyways, but okay, we'll show off a couple examples of this. This is a 30% dip. This is point C here towards the end. This is when the credits start rolling. Oh wait, you actually can't see that. There we go. So credits start rolling, and immediately you see this massive dip, and it just starts going down, 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 down. Credits roll, and immediately it's dipping for the rest of the video here. Other examples. This is a 25% dip. This is point A. You can see this massive dip. Massive dip as soon as those credits start. Yep. And then looks like those were the only couple of examples, but at least the only ones that I logged, but whatever. Anyways, next up are walking simulators. So these examples, there's not a lot of super specific stuff logged, because it's basically the way that a walking simulator looks is just like really sharp dip in the beginning, and then it just kind of keeps going down, because there's typically not really much of anything very engaging going on. Not a lot of bumps, not a lot of major dips, just constant decline. Basically, walking simulators, it's bad for retention, all right? But there are scenarios that I've seen where if a walking simulator has a decent variety of scenery and no specific like sort of area or biome or set piece is, you know, being shown on screen for too long, then people will be more engaged. Again, still not super engaged, but a variety in your environment is very useful. You know, if you have a long dirt pathway through a samey forest that players need to spend an entire minute running down, retention is going to drop pretty significantly. But if you add things along the path, you've got interesting landmarks ahead that people can anticipate getting to, right? People are like, oh, what's that interesting looking house at the end of the path? Right now there's some form of question in their mind, like, what is that? I want to see what is there. So if you can, you know, design your levels in such a way where there are things people can see. There are goals that people can see, landmarks, things to walk towards. Then it's like, in a way, it acts as a progress bar, essentially, right? How close you are to that interesting thing in the distance, that's like your progress along this progress bar, and so that will help increase retention. Let me see if I can find a couple of real examples here. This is probably the best example right here. This is, you explore, it's a very, very nice looking game. You know, as far as walking simulators go, this is about as pretty as you can get. You explore an Icelandic environment. I believe you get to take pictures. You take pictures of stuff. There's like photography. But this is basically just a 15-minute video where you walk around. And you can see here, the retention gets down really, 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 really low, excluding a couple points, like this point C here. In this spot, the player finds the last location that they must visit and photograph, and they find a person. There's an actual person. Wowie. This is the first person seen in the game. Their silhouette is visible, and they're standing at the end of a cliff or ravine. Player takes a picture of them, and the game ends. So it's something different happening, and it's the ending of the game. So there's a handful of people that are fast forwarding to see that specific part. But in any case, yeah, walking simulators, bad for retention. But there are some things to learn based off of environment design and how you could design an environment that's a little bit more engaging. Okay, dullness. This one is a little bit more broad. This isn't super specific, but basically, dull, boring, or overly slow parts of your game can easily cause 3 to 15% dips, whatever that might look like. I gave a handful of examples down here, but basically these dips are worsened by length of the dull moment and by whether or not the player is currently working towards a clear goal. You know, again, this kind of also encompasses things like those loading screens and those level completion screens, things like that. You know, if you've got 5 seconds of walking down a hallway towards a door, that's not a dull moment, because also, again, like we talked about in the environment design, if there's a goal, if there's clearly something that you are walking towards and there's some mystery around what you're walking towards, then that's going to be more engaging. But if the player, and this is like a real example, if the player walks into an elevator and spends 15 seconds riding the elevator, and you're just sitting there in an elevator, you could easily see a 5% dip. Usually dips caused by dullness are noticeable after around 10 seconds of this kind of just dull, repetitive, nothing really happening kind of moment. You know, some other examples that I had here that were causing some dips were like 10 seconds of like climbing a ladder. Like players walking around, they're running around, they're playing the game normally, and then they get to a ladder and then they're just climbing, and that was causing a dip. 5 seconds of a black screen during a cutscene, so it might have been something loading, but just that black screen, that's not engaging. 15 plus seconds of aimless walking, again, like kind of with the oh, I just realized I skipped a section, but we'll go back and hit on that one. You know, with the walking simulators, it doesn't take long, is what I'm saying, for the retention to start dipping on this stuff. Which is also why, again, this is one of these examples where it's like, to have stuff constantly happening every 15 seconds, that's kind of overkill, because this is one of these things where YouTubers recognize, like, okay, this part is kind of dull, I'm going to cut it out of the video. So in a YouTube or TikTok scenario, oftentimes things like this will be remedied quite easily. Again, in live streams, not so much. In live streams, you can't get around it. But again, it's just stuff to consider while you're designing, okay? Long, boring tutorial sequences, you know, over-explaining stuff that doesn't need to get explained at that point in the game. You know, ideally, you know, kind of chop it up. Explain stuff in steps across, you know, maybe the first 15 minutes of your game. If people don't need to know how to crouch until half an hour into the game, don't teach them how to crouch until half an hour into the game, right? Don't overload them with boring information. So yeah, dullness. All right, let's go back up to lighting and obscure style. So this one, there were a handful of games that I was seeing where the retention seemed to be dipping a lot more than it should have. I was like, what is going on that's causing this really steady decline? And what it seems like is games that are overly dark visually, or that have like really like kind of convoluted art styles, really harsh art styles, it makes the viewing experience frustrating. It makes people more likely to leave. It's just if the visuals are kind of grating or difficult to see and identify, then you're not going to see like massive focused dips. You're just going to see a more steady decline over time. So often this is going to be seen in horror games that are really dark, but also there were some other games that were also just that had kind of harsh art styles. I think this might have been one of them. So there's a couple other things going on in this specific example, I think. But so there's two things. One, this game is high action, and we'll talk about why action is really bad for retention in a little bit. Probably a long bit, because this video is gonna be friggin' long. We're not very far through this. We got a lot more stuff to go. But yeah, we'll talk about why action is bad. So action is probably a contributing factor here, but also you could very clearly see the art style here is, it's cool, but it's very dark. It's kind of obscure. And it's a little bit difficult to see kind of what's going on. And so as a result, again, there's other factors as well, but you can see the retention goes way down. Now, largely or partially, at least probably in regards to action, but we're going to get into that later. Hey, here's actually a good example. I'm just scrolling through here. This is a great example of level completions that I didn't see when I was talking about that section. This is grapple hoops. Every single time, you can see like the retention stair stepping, and there's a couple other examples in this document that I have of that. But you can see the retention stair steps every single time that a level ends. And that looks kind of like they're very short rounds. Oh, also, here's an example of a dull sequence where we're just going down an elevator waiting for stuff to load. Again, probably better than just a straight black like loading screen. But if there are other ways to get around it, ideally you should. So, anyways, you get the point. So, back to where we were. Repetition. So, repetition is kind of like I've got written here. It's a tough one to get specific on, but it's worth bringing up and thinking about. Basically, if your core gameplay element or core gameplay loop is constantly repeating in, like, let's say under 10 seconds, then you probably have a repetitive game that's going to cause people to become bored very, very quickly. Think Flappy Bird, okay? This is very closely related to action scenes and how constant repetitive action causes massive dips in retention. Again, we're going to get to that in a little bit. Examples would be stuff like Night of the Consumers. This is one that it seemed like, since the gameplay is pick up a box, put stuff on a shelf, that gameplay loop seems to be a little bit too short to keep people like really engaged. And obviously, here's the deal. That game has gone plenty viral. There are other things that are carrying it, but that specific element is slightly working against it. Again, the goal isn't necessarily, I mean, ideally you should probably try and implement as many of these features as you can, but it's not like you can't go viral by committing a couple of these sins, right? Yeah, so in Night of the Consumers, what we have is where it's kind of just generally dropping off a bit faster than some other games. Again, it holds fairly well in the beginning, but it's kind of like once people have seen it, they're like, okay, I kind of get the idea, and then it seems like the engagement kind of falls off a little bit. Let's see, another example here was ASMR Simulator. ASMR Simulator. Yeah, so this is one where there's not really a goal to keep people engaged. The gimmick gets old pretty quickly, and people start dropping off really fast to, by the end, it's, you know, down to 17%. Or sorry, no, down to 17% by the end of the first minute. That's
person white, that's fine. If you want to make a white person black, that's fine. If you want to make a curvy chick, make her fat or ugly or like weird looking, that's fine. If you want to make a skinny girl or, you know, some girl that's fat, make her skinny and more attractive maybe, then go ahead and do it. It's fine. It's art, and you should be able to be creative in whatever way you want with fan art because you're a fan of the show, and if you want to express that in a unique way, that's totally okay. The problem is that people treat it in a one-directional way, where it's like if you make a, you know, like a white character black, people are like, wow, this is great. And if somebody makes a black character white, or sorry, oh yeah, a black character white, then they're also getting harassed. The issue is that there's a double standard. There should not be a double standard at all. If you want to draw a canonical character in a different race, a different gender, like people gender bend characters all the time, and I think that's great. If you don't think that's true, I have one word for you. Bowsette. It's obviously true. It's obviously a good thing. And I think also the issue is that a lot of people who are in Japan, they view it as cultural erasure because they think that the people that are doing it are trying to erase their race and erase the Japanese influence of anime and Americanize it. And I think that's what's made a lot of people who are in Japan, like actual Japanese people, react so negatively. Which they are. Yeah, I think that they are in some cases, but I think that's okay if you're a fan of the show and you want to change it to something that you want. Like, my viewpoint is very simple. You can make fan art however you want to make fan art. It's the same with the Anya stuff with mouthwashing. If you want to make this character, you know, very, you know, timid and you know, like, you know, demure, right? And just kind of like, just like the way that she is in the game, basically, that's fine. Or if you want to make her have massive tits and a huge ass, that's also totally fine. Either one is fine because it's fan art and it's not real in their cartoons. How's this even a conversation? The cartoons!
So a few days ago, we were talking about this art of Okrun and Momo, which has now collected over 90,000 likes.
Wow.
However, many people in Japan are not
happy. Well, you can
with
see that this wasn't a good time for whoever made this.
And Momo, which has now collected over
because you can see, you know what happens whenever this is gray? Oh, I know what happens. That means that you had some people that didn't agree with what you said.
1,000 likes. However, many people in Japan are not happy with this art. For example, this tweet with over 70,000 likes. Once again, it reads, "There are still many racists who say that changing the race of a Japanese character is not discrimination. And as such, you can see from the quotes, they say it's a great drawing because the character is not Japanese. If you point this out..."
See, that's totally different. And I think also the reason why this happens is because of how people react when a black character is drawn as white. And like how negative and like psychotic people can be about that, and like very aggressive and hostile. I think that if that didn't happen, people wouldn't have this perspective.
Will be called a racist. Their IQ is too low to even understand what discrimination is. There was also this response getting over 370,000 likes, reading simply, "Yo, I'm Japanese. Stop making Asian characters black. We're not Disney characters." In the responses to that post, I saw some people very confused by the Disney comment. So for anyone confused, they're likely referring to how Disney has race swapped characters. Anyways,
it's obvious. Like, yeah, if you don't know what they mean by that, you're being intentionally dishonest.
Just in this tweet that I also showed in the prior video, where this Japanese user says, I'll put it back and post Okarun and Momo. I believe when I showed that tweet in my prior video, it had a few hundred likes. Well, since then, it's gotten over 210,000
Wow,
likes.
holy shit. Yeah, I think a lot of Japanese people are probably tired of it. It makes sense.
Plus this response to it with 69,000 likes reading, when Akawa Bukubu Sensei drew Ida from Splatoon 2, he had a slightly lighter skin tone, so everyone made a big fuss about it being racist, but then they're happily making Japanese characters black and justifying it. Their double standards are ridiculous. Which one is discriminatory?
This is exactly right. And the same thing happened with Natlan with Genshin Impact, where everybody was celebrating the, darkening the skin of the characters. And they were like, well, this is the way the characters should be. They should be like this. Well, who decided that? You're not the one making the show. You're not doing that. I think that's probably, after seeing the way that people reacted to Genshin Impact, this is probably what also caused people to be more against this mindset. You can draw them however you like, but you can't at the same time. The problem is the double standard. It's not the fan art itself. As I said, my viewpoint is that you can draw fan art of any character whoever you want. I don't care. It's a drawing. It's a cartoon. What a stupid thing to think about. Who cares?
So they're citing that Splatoon situation that I've talked about a few times on this channel, where the creator of Pop Team Epic had made this marina art and then received a tremendous amount of insults from people on Twitter, including this tweet, which was like basically sending him a death threat. As I say every time, of course, they would argue that it's just...
This is the problem, is that I think Twitter has really had... I think they really need to start permabanning the people that are making these posts. I think they do. And... like, it's okay to, like, have, like, disagreements and stuff like that on like, Twitter, but saying that people need to be killed or that you want to kill people, I think this should be a perma. It should, yeah, it's weird, I know. Why? Because I think that it's a call for violence, and I think that people do take their actions that they, like things that happen on the internet, and it does radicalize them, and they are violent. Like, I don't even think this has any correlation to the United Healthcare CEO thing at all. I think it's a totally different situation, but there have been other instances of this happening. It's like, why let people say this? It's so easy to just not do that.
A joke or something, but that never detracts from how pathetic it is. The artist had even
now you're for censorship? I've always been for censorship of death threats and calls for violence. When was I not for censorship on calls for violence and death threats? When? I don't believe you have been. Okay. It's annoying.
This response saying, regarding the content of this fan art, I received a response that this was racism against black people because the character's skin is depicted as lighter than in the original work. I also believe that if Ida were human, he would be black. Sorry, my coloring skills are poor, so it's not accurate. Of course, this is a very talented and successful artist, and his coloring skills are certainly not poor. Regardless, he felt the need to make that tweet and apologize to the mob. And for many years, Japanese artists would get harassed on Twitter, and many of them would apologize or delete the artwork, etc., etc. But it seems like also over the years...
This is the problem, too, is that they harass the artists and they attack them for the for making fan art that people on Twitter deem to be wrong in some way or another. That's also the big reason why you're seeing a huge negative reaction to it.
More and more Japanese people have been sick of this sort of treatment, and also sick of the double standards, so it seems like lately we're seeing more and more of them push back. Now returning to the Okarun and Momo art situation, things ended up getting crazier, because the English voice actor for Okarun decided to get involved, changing his profile pic on Twitter to that art of Okarun and saying, "This is fire," and thanking the artist. And indeed, in his bio, we can see it says he, him, voice actor, Dan Okarun. In another tweet, we can get further context, as here we see the voice actress, Anaris Q, changing her profile pic to that art of Momo, and going on to say, new profile pic, had the couple profile pic with AJ Beckles VO, and going on to...
Well, I hope they have fun. I do. Because in a few years, they'll be replaced by AI, and then that's going to be it. Because, like, if you're a Japanese studio, do you want to have... There's a big issue that we have here in, like, the Western world. And I don't know what it's like in Japan, because I don't live there, I don't understand their culture, I don't speak Japanese. But it certainly seems like over in Japan and in China, it seems like there's a lot of resentment for American people taking Japanese and Chinese culture and appropriating it for virtue signal points. Just on a fundamental level. We're just tired of it. They're just annoyed by it, right? It's obnoxious. And so, and it's very easy. It's justified, right? Very justified. I think this is why you're going to see a lot of things turn into being AI. It's because if you're one of these studios, why do you want to deal with somebody who is going to constantly put you in these weird PR issues? Like, it puts you in like this really uncomfortable and bad spot PR-wise, just so this person can virtue signal about being a good person. That's the issue. And it's cheaper. Yeah, good point too. That's another really big component. It shoves them into a culture war? Yeah, exactly. Like, you're volunteering the show to be part of a culture war that the studio doesn't want to have anything to do with.
To credit the artist, AJ's response saying had to complete the pair with my girl, and his tweet getting 39,000 likes. However, you may have noticed that in some pair with my girl,
it got 39,000 likes, but
39,000.
Anytime you see this, who can reply? You know that the tweet was made by a pussy ass bitch. That's it. That's the reason.
Likes. However, you may have noticed that in some of those screenshots, AJ's profile pic is no longer that art of Oakrune, as it seems like within 24 hours or less, he actually changed it to a different profile pic. A tweet explaining that, saying, my profile pic is now a fan drawing based off me doing a silly Oakrune pose. An Afro-Latino man, which I think is pretty cool. I hope you guys like it. Although that tweet was later changed to instead say, my profile pic is now a fan drawing based off me, an Afro-Latino man. I hope you guys like it.
Well, this is the issue, is that people keep trying to put their own identity into shows. They keep trying to make the show reflect their own identity, rather than try to identify with the show. They try to make the show identify with them. And it's extremely selfish, and it's annoying for everybody else.
Like it. As of recording, and Neris' profile pic is still Momo, and we can get more context on roles that she's played in her bio that reads Voice of Mirko, My Hero Academia, Lynette Genshin, Fei Xiao Honkai Star Rail, Nessa Pokemon, Kimberly, Street Fighter 6, JJK Dora, and she/they. In her pinned tweet, also providing context to her role in Dandadan, saying that she's the English voice of Muko. As for AJ Beckles, you'll have to come to your own conclusion as to why you think he changed
I'm gonna be honest, like, I'm a boomer, and anytime that I see a anime that, like, the setting is a high school or a middle school, I'm much more of a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Berserk, Vinland Saga kind of guy. Ghost in the Shell. I've always thought anime was a great tool to tell a fantastical story. So incredible it can't even be existing in the real world. So maybe I'll watch Dandadan, but it's really not my type of thing. Castlevania.
Profile pic so swiftly. Maybe he decided that he was not helping the situation, thinking he was fanning the flames or something like that, and therefore decided to change his profile pic and not get further involved. However, there were also some other things that happened.
The 3-episode
Once
rule?
again, come to your own conclusion.
I will.
But
I'll
here's
try
the
it
rest
out.
of the information.
People really
In
like
the
it.
responses to his tweet about changing his profile picture, we can see a number of tweets like these. This one, for example, saying, as a black guy myself, I stand with Japan when I say some of y'all need to be stopped. And posting a few images of prior tweets that AJ had made. These reading, every time there is a black actor cast in a role in fantasy where the source material version is lighter skin, someone always has something to say about it. So tiring. It doesn't
They
affect
do that with black characters being cast as well. The issue is that, again, everybody can see that when race swaps happen, 95% of the time, they're in one direction. And with gender swaps happening 95% of the time, they are in one direction. Humans are genetically programmed over millions of years of evolution, and natural selection to identify patterns. I'm sorry, but like that's just how it is.
The character whatsoever. It's okay. And the other one reading, the reason white people in most cases shouldn't be playing POC isn't a matter of color. It's culture. Speaking for black people, we know what a barbershop sounds like on Sundays, what a hot comb smells like when it's going through our hair. It's not the color, it's the culture. And so
Yeah, that's straight from a quote from Denzel Washington. And Denzel Washington was right about that. I think he was, but the difference is that you're talking about race swapping a character that is in a setting of Japan. I think that it's true that you can't race swap a character that's African American to a white person and then not have something be lost in the cultural transition there. He's totally right. Denzel Washington was 100% right with that. Of course he is. It's common sense. But you're looking at these characters are not, their culture is not African American. It's not about their gender or their, not their, sorry, it is about their gender, but it's not about their race at all. It's not the component here. Like he's fighting, like I think this is true in some cases, but this just simply is not one of those cases. Fudge man, you're more than your skin. I think that there's a unique experience that people that are part of a minority group in a country, like for example, African American people do have. Now, it's not universal, but there is a trend and there's a degree of relatability and shared experience there. And I think that to say that a racial experience doesn't exist is delusional. And I think it goes just as far as saying that every experience that you have is categorized by your race. I view both extremes to be extremes, and I think that there's a very obvious experience that a person goes through as a minority in a group in an area that a person who is a majority there might not necessarily be able to relate to. Isn't that Denzel Washington? Yes, it is. So, like, there's a degree of this, but the problem is that every conversation about it is done for the purpose of optics, and it's done for the purpose of looking good rather than being good. I think that there's a very, very good conversation to be had about how to approach this in a healthy way. But the problem is that almost everybody who tries to approach this topic is doing so for some form of goal, rather than having like a genuine conversation and trying to like see what the other person is saying. But yeah, I think in this circumstance, it's totally different. This is totally ridiculous to say it in this circumstance.
And so, as mentioned, many people in the responses and even elsewhere on the internet began sharing those various tweets of AJ's. However, the situation also proliferated back over in Japan too, as we would then have this tweet from Shin responding to that prior tweet that AJ made where he talked about changing his profile pic to that altered version of Okarun. Shin going on to say this and getting over 17,000 likes. Please spread the word. This is a declaration by the overseas voice actors that they support, quote, the racism that disrespects the original work by turning characters black and excluding Japanese people, unquote. Change the icon image of the X account to, quote, a Japanese exclusion blackening hate image, unquote.
Bro, they take no prisoners, don't they? Oh, God. Wow.
It expressed blasphemy against the original work and discrimination against Japanese people.
Yeah.
This is an international issue. Officially, please remove this voice actor from his role immediately.
And here's another thing that people might not realize. Y'all single-handedly managed to red pill Japan just by being obnoxious Lamau. The other issue is that these Japanese companies, you know who they listen to? People in Japan. It's the same thing that happened with Genshin. It's like everybody in America can be fucking out of their minds about how Genshin is, but nobody gives a shit. But if there's like 3 or 4 threads on Bilibili about how something's wrong in Genshin, oh, okay, all right. So let's go ahead. We're going to look into this. We're going to give you guys some free polls. We're going to change it immediately. We're so sorry. Please don't quit playing the game. It's a red alert, right? And so I bet it's the same thing over there too. I forgot what studio this also happened with. I forgot, but this is not the first time it's been like this.
The responses to Shin's tweet, including, y'all single-handedly managed to red pill Japan just by being obnoxious. Conversely, however, this tweet seems to be upset by Shin's tweet, saying, the Japanese nerds are starting to get on my nerves. And this response from Zero Dozer talking
I'm sure. The issue is that, and I think that this is what makes people like this so unlikable. It's that if you were to categorize another group of people that they view as disenfranchised, and then have a negative pejorative following that, or like negatively stereotype them as a group, these people would be losing their minds and furious at you. But because they think that they can do it to this group because they've decided that it's okay, based off of their own arbitrary criteria, now they're able to do the exact thing that they hate.
About localization issues as well, saying, now the Japanese know what the localization industry thinks of them. My suggestion? Make a move to get these losers out of their jobs.
I think that they should. I think that anime is a core part of how Japan exports its culture to the world. And I think that they should do their best to maintain the cultural significance of that and to make sure that it's something that's truly coming from Japan. So it's not co-opted by international interests. And I also want to say this. There's a reason why a lot of us watch anime. And it's because we like the way that they tell stories more. So we don't want you to change it. Even us here in America that have been watching, I've been watching anime. I mean, fuck, I remember, dude, school would let out at 2:40, Dragon Ball Z came at 3, and me and my friend walked home, and we never missed the intro. Every single fucking time. So I've been watching it then. Adult Swim came out. I was like, as soon as I saw Full Metal Alchemist and Ghost in the Shell, I was like, what have I been doing with my fucking life? And so, yes, I love anime. I've always watched anime. It's great. And so, I don't want to see it Americanized either. Like, if I did, I'd just be watching some American show. What the fuck, man? So it's literally better for everybody who's an actual fan, and the only people that are pushing for this are people that don't actually like anime. They just want to use anime as a vehicle to advance their worldview.
Both in the West and East are sick of these racist psychopaths.
They
Over on
are.
Kotaku in action, a top post would get made saying, Ken Takakura, Dandadan, English VA supports blackwashing art, also thinks white VAs can't voice POC, but not vice versa. English voice actor, again exposing racism and hypocrisy, again showing we need to clean house the voice acting industry. And going on to post
The real problem is that this tweet, there's a lot of truth to this, but we can't talk about it because everybody's so fucking dishonest. It's so annoying.
tweets that we took a look at earlier, just
Context
for a
matters?
refresher,
Yeah,
the
it
ones where
does.
AJ had said, every time there's a black actor cast in a role in fantasy
can't we
where
be
the
normal?
source material
Yeah.
version is lighter skinned, someone always has something to say about it. So tiring. It doesn't affect the character whatsoever. It's okay. And
It does. It does because people identify with a character, and a character's race is a barrier of identification. So I don't know. I mean, how many sociological studies do we need to have that say that people between the same race, this is like a commonality? It's obvious. Like it's so obvious. Like I understand it. Like we have to pretend like this isn't real, but it is obviously fucking real. Of course. And I think also, by the way, there are so many examples of like characters that are like played by like black actors, or people that are black characters that have people that like them that are of all different races. I mean, the best example, Goku.
the reason white people in most cases shouldn't be playing POC isn't a matter of color. It's culture. Speaking for black
Yeah, also, that's another really great example. Darth Vader. That's one people that never talk about. Yeah, Darth fucking Vader.
people, we know what a barbershop sounds like on Sundays,
Mhm.
what a hot comb smells like when it's going through our hair. It's not the color, it's the
Kratos,
culture.
yeah.
Getting top
Exactly.
responses such as, imagine a white person saying all this, they'd lose their job, receive death threats to them and their family, and would probably be blacklisted from the industry for good.
That's the reason why a lot of people hate this, is they don't even hate the fact that it's happening. They hate the fact that there's a double standard and they're being told to act like it's not there, because it's a personal insult to their intelligence that they can't see what's directly in front of them. That's why people take hypocrisy so personally on the internet, is because it's a personal insult to your intelligence as an individual.
Satirically, someone says, "Excuse me, sir. I noticed you inadvertently use offensive terminology blacklisted in your post.
Yeah.
We don't use white/black to refer to good or bad anymore. It's 2024, chud." And another saying, "What a frickin' racist thing to say. Quote, all black people have the same culture and experience, unquote." And the implied BS of, "Ha, whites have no culture." And speaking for black people, who the heck made you king of the blacks? And this one saying, he changed his profile pic to a fan art of himself. I guess his agency told him to shut up. And that cycles me back.
Yeah, they probably did. Because like if you're a production studio, do you want to hire a voice actor who's going to volunteer you to be on one side of a culture war? Abso-fucking-lutely not. Absolutely not. No. As a black person, I cannot stand this dude. I think that there's a lot of, listen, I think one of the worst thing that these people did is that, like, in 2004, everybody was playing Halo, everybody was saying slurs, and everybody got along in the lobbies. And somehow, over the 20 years, we've just slowly gotten rid of that. And now we're back to identifying as these different groups, being hyper aware of this. It's so obnoxious and weird. It was better back then. I think it was. I think it was a lot better back then. We devolved. We have devolved. And do you want to know why we've devolved? We've devolved because we've allowed people that have no social skills, no friends, and they're disagreeable, annoying people. We've allowed them to be the ones who make the decisions, and they call the shots for what is acceptable to interact with people with. That's the reason why it's happened. Think of like the 5 biggest losers in your high school, put them on a council, have them decide what you can do in class and what you can do at like a school function, and then think about how unfun, boring, and annoying that is, and then realize that that's what life is like in 2024. We are catering to the lowest common denominator of disagreeable, annoying people in high school that had no friends. And they went into HR and they're trying to make rules for everyone. They're fucking annoying.
Back
That's
to what I
what I
said
think.
earlier in the video about Coming to your own conclusion here, why do you think he changed his profile pic back and so fast? Do you think it was out of like some good character development? Like maybe he was like, you know what, this is not good. Like I'm making a mess out of the situation, so he changed it back.
Like there was a time in my high school where there was this one black kid and he would come in and play Smash with us and nobody liked him. Do you want to know why we didn't like him? It wasn't because he was black. It's because he kept telling everybody that he was better than everyone and that he had unlocked Sonic in Super Smash Bros. Melee, but he won't show us how to do it, and he would never play against anyone, and he would come and sit there during lunch while we would be playing and tell us that we're all bad. That's why we didn't fucking like him. It had nothing to do with this, right? I don't care about that. So fucking annoying. Yes. Yes, exactly. It's making me mad again. I'm thinking about it. Were you bad? I was better than him. I'll tell you that.
Or maybe it really is like his agency telling him to shut up, although that does seem kind of unlikely. A lot of these English voice acting companies seem like they would support the tweets that AJ made, if anything. Maybe it was the whole thing causing people to...
I don't think that they support the tweets. I think they're afraid not to support the tweets. And I think that's changing over time.
Look into the history of what he's posted and not wanting all that attention.
She had a white friend that did the same shit. Yeah, it was me.
Maybe it was the tweet going on in Japan where people are calling for him to lose his job. Or some combination of all that, who knows? Leave your thoughts in the comments. As always, thank you for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this coverage, and if you did, consider liking and or subscribing. Appreciate ya, and I'll see you in the next one.
I think that it would be really great if we could talk about this stuff the way that we used to talk about it. Because, like, what was really good about the old lobbies back in, like, the Xbox Live days and the Ventrilo days is that you could sit down with somebody who was from, like, I don't know, fucking Saudi Arabia or Dubai and just ask them, like, why don't you let women drive? So, like, if you draw the profit, what happens over there? And they can ask you, like, so how many times do you guys have school shootings? So, like, can people bring guns to school? So, like, how many do people actually, like, are they, like, really having sex with their cousins and stuff? Or is that just on Jerry Springer? And they can you can ask these questions with no fucking filter. And it was amazing. It was so great because people got a chance to understand the other person in an honest way. You could find answers. Yes, exactly. It was so good. And now we have these people, these tone policers, these losers that are trying to unwrite years of progress. Years. And I'm so disappointed. It's sad. Bring it back. The best way that you can bring it back is by just acting that way like you used to act. And if people don't like it, then fuck them. Because what are they going to do? They're going to cry about it? Who cares? Who gives a fuck? It's so perplexing. It really is, man. I think so. Yeah, just act the same way. If people cry about it, give the video a like. It's so funny for me to see this happen. It is. I think the Japanese people are seeing this and they see how one-directional this, erasure, basically what it is, and I think it's offensive to them. Rocksteady confirms it's pulling the plug on new Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League content after Season 4. Wow. Rocksteady is pulling the plug on new content for Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, with the developer announcing its plans to end support for the troubled online game in January 2025, which will include the release of an offline mode and a new character called Deathstroke. Suicide Squad's story will remain playable via offline mode. Elsewhere, Rocksteady and Suicide Squad will remain available for purchase. Oh, good. A difficult release for Suicide Squad. Yeah, I wonder why. I wonder why it was difficult. I want to remind you guys that Suicide Squad was delayed because Warner Brothers knew it was garbage. They knew it sucked so much dick that they had to delay the game even before it was released the first time. Let's see how many people are playing it. So the game it went on sale. I'm not even kidding you. for $3. $3. And even then, it died. A $5 deluxe edition. That's a hamburger. And these people weren't hungry. Suicide Squad kills the looter shooter trend.
Yeah, looking forward to killing the Justice League and all, but
What's this?
well, you know, these guns are a bit shit.
For me, the disappointment of Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League isn't just about its quality. It's about what it's not as much as about what it is. There's very little of what made developer Rocksteady's games so great in the past.
Yeah.
Near unparalleled superhero power trips that sit alongside Insomniac's critically acclaimed Spider-Man series. It's also the latest in a
Well, it's also Harley Quinn was hot in the last one, and she's not hot in this one. People got the wrong idea about Harley Quinn. They thought that people liked her as a character. People didn't like Harley Quinn, they liked Margot Robbie. So if you're adding Harley Quinn into the game and you're not making her hot, then you're making a mistake. Like, what are we talking about? How is this even a conversation?
frustratingly long line of beloved single-player championing studios delving into unwelcoming, loot-infested live service waters.
Nobody ever believes things can get this bad until it happens.
Yeah,
It's
that's
been a
about right.
perilous leap for many to take, with success limited to very few not called Bungie. And I hope we're now at the end of this detrimental trend that's plagued so many.
I don't think that we're going to be at the end of it, to be honest, because a lot of people want to have their live service game because that's what's going to cause them to make a lot of money in the long term. They're willing to invest a ton of time and money into it just to have that happen. I like looter shooters. I wish there were good ones. Well, just play Once Human. Once Human's a pretty good game. I mean, First Descendant's pretty fun. It can get repetitive after a while, but yeah. Yeah, people like Warframe.
In recent years, BioWare abandoned the comfort of its trademark deep RPG writing in favor of Anthem's cold, hollow, RNG-fueled exos.
That's crazy. So they made Anthem and then they made Dragon Age? Uh-oh. That's not looking good.
It was the first real notable example of this happening, a studio ripping apart from its roots to chase high-risk trends popularized by the likes of Destiny. BioWare veteran James Olin told Rock Paper Shotgun that Anthem was the ultimate expression of that. It got away from everything. It's kind of like the anti-BioWare game. There have since been others chasing these online looter-shooter trends that have
I've always had the viewpoint that I think that a good game studio can make almost any kind of a game. Like Blizzard, for example, never made an FPS, and then they changed the entire FPS landscape with Overwatch. Like Riot has made tons of really amazing games. Like the fact is that a good studio, Capcom, right, really great studios are going to be able to do this correctly, and bad studios won't be able to do anything. And I think really the fact that BioWare did Anthem and they failed at Anthem, and then they went back to their roots with Dragon Age and they failed with Dragon Age 2, maybe the problem isn't live service, maybe the problem is BioWare. I mean, really. Because if like, you know, this is just, it's just like logic, right? Because like if you look at it logically, so the game failed because BioWare was doing what they didn't understand, okay? That's the premise. That they're chasing trends and they weren't doing what they're good at. So then you would logically assume that when they are not chasing trends and they do what they are good at, they would be successful. They're not. So that clearly wasn't the problem. There it is. Sorry.
Rapidly gone out of fashion with each passing year. Arcane brought none of its best-in-class level design to the empty vampiric streets of Redfall. Crystal Dynamics
They didn't do it with Dragon Age either.
promised much in
better,
its
but not
Marvel's
good.
Avengers campaign, but lost its way completely regarding its live service offerings. And most recently,
Well, it's like nobody told them that they have to make this. Like, if you just look at the visuals for this, are we really going to talk about how live service is bad, or can we just talk about how terrible this fucking spell effect is? You can't even see what's happening. Like, I hope this game has an epilepsy warning when you log in, because you're going to go fucking blind looking at it. So a lot of these problems with games like this are just primarily based off of bad design and bad programming and bad decisions that were made creatively. There's no real, like, I don't think that there's no law that says that you can't make a live service looter shooter game and have it be good. But I mean, if you do this, it's going to be bad no matter what.
live service offerings. And most recently, Rocksteady traded in their expertly designed Gotham for a shallow metropolis. Suicide Squad's main problem isn't in its art direction, character design, or storytelling, although mileage may vary on that last one. These are all things we've come to expect and enjoy from Rocksteady, masters of their craft when it comes to creating superhero open worlds. But while it has largely delivered on that trio of creative disciplines, the studio's other notable strengths...
What clearly didn't deliver on it because it failed. The game was massively unsuccessful. Everybody was unhappy with the campaign. They thought the campaign disrespected the original voice actor of Batman, or at least one of them. I think it was James Conroy. People hated this. They hated everything about the game.
Best-in-class campaign design, genre-leading combat system...
People hated the campaign. There were 2 points in the campaign that people really didn't like. They didn't like the fact that, I mean, I would say spoilers, but nobody cares. Batman gets killed in the end, and it's done in a very, just like fucking shitty way. And then they also didn't like that Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn had some sort of implied lesbian relationship, and then Poison Ivy gets reincarnated into being a prepubescent girl, and then Harley Quinn is asking her questions about if she remembers anything. Like, both of these things are really weird, and if you want to add this into the game, it's going to make people uncomfortable. No, I'm serious. Like, literally go and look it up. Like, I made a video about it when it came out. And so, yikes, it's a big yikes. It was fucking weird. Like, let's not go and pretend like the campaign was great and people liked it. People hated the campaign.
And engaging open worlds are the areas in which Suicide Squad has stumbled. And that faltering is rooted in the pivot to creating a long-time content delivery machine, aka a live service shooter. In the 9 years it has taken the London-based studio to finish work on Kill the Justice League, numerous examples of exactly the same kind of pivot project failing have come and gone. Yet, no change.
I think here's the writing between the lines, in my opinion. Studios fail when they go to live service looter shooter games, not because live service looter shooter games are bad or they can't succeed, but because the drive to go there is driven by profit and not by creativity. So a lot of these studios, they're chasing these trends because they think these trends will make them money. They're not chasing these trends because they think this is a good way to deliver an experience to their audience. They're not chasing the trend because they think that, oh, well, this is going to make the game better. No, they're doing it because they have no creative goal themselves and they're trying to latch on to trends. I'll give you an example, a parallel to this you guys can maybe relate to a little bit, is that on Twitch, have you ever seen somebody who tries to play the new big popular game, but it's very clear that they have no real interest or, you know, involvement in it, so they just end up kind of losing viewers because of it? Right? It's like, you? What do you mean, me? Not me. I mean, I had 200,000 viewers playing PoE. Like, I always farm the new games, and I'm usually top of directory by a mile. But I'm saying, like, people that end up going and losing a massive amount of viewers for it. So, yeah. Like, that's what I'm kind of saying, is, like, this is what happens, right? Is that when you go after something... You see kind of like what my point is with this. Sorry, I think I'm not explaining it in a good way. Hopefully you guys still understand what I'm saying. Is that it's not the genre, it's the impulse behind the drive to go to the genre that is the actual problem, and it indicates a lack of creativity and a lack of like a creative North Star.
Change of direction has seemingly been plotted.
That's what I
That's
think.
likely because of the weight of the AAA machine. Like a heavy cruise liner, it can be difficult to change the course of all those resources and staff when the journey begins. But the result of that is a wholly incongruous mess of a looter shooter where bland gunplay makes neither canonical sense nor an engaging gameplay loop.
Nobody said that you have to have those colors and spell effects in the game. I really don't like how people try to turn this into, oh, well, the reason why they failed is because they tried to pursue like live service or something. No, nobody told you had to program the spell effects and the UI to look like that. You did that yourself, and it looks terrible. Like, it's just everything about the game is unappealing. It failed because it sucks? Yeah, exactly. It's like it's failure all the way down, right? It's failure at like a structural level with like the type of game it is. It's failure at a narrative level with the way the story was told. It's failure at a gameplay level, and it's failure at a visual level. It's failure everywhere. It's not like, oh, if it wasn't live service, this game would be good. It would be terrible. People would hate it if it wasn't live service too.
Oh, this'll make my boomerangs jealous. Sorry, ladies.
Gear progression and how it intertwines with talent trees and class abilities is a delicate balance that is by no means easy to achieve. The Borderlands series has historically done it very well, and while the Pandora Gunfests do have significant stories told throughout, you always get the feeling that developer Gearbox's focus is on making the most outrageous.
Well, it's also the characters are appealing.
You
like this character
always
is
get
cool.
the feeling that developer
This guy's awesome. Look at this guy's. Look at his design. This character looks fucking cool. Like,
Gearbox's focus is on making the most outrageous and fun arsenal to play with as possible. But Borderlands games are, of course,
okay, compared to Suicide Squad, he does.
Not live service. Tackling that added demand of a long life of ever-expanding content adds a whole
7 surrounded by 4s is a 9.
New weight on top of all that to balance. A more pertinent example then might be Diablo, which has achieved this as successfully as anyone over the years thanks to Blizzard, a studio whose very DNA is built around online multiplayer experiences. For almost 30 years, the developers refined a gameplay loop completely centered on chasing that next piece of loot. That desire to want to come back repeatedly and grind for the next piece of gear is key to the success of a loot-based game, and is what I look for over all else in the genre. Strike gold with that, and even games that possess just a sliver of Rocksteady's storytelling chops, such as 2021's Outriders, can keep me engaged enough to keep playing thanks to fun weapons and abilities.
I think the best example of this is actually the First Descendant. I hate to tell you guys this, I don't want to even admit this, but I actually paid attention to the story in the First Descendant, and I feel like I would have gained more IQ points by getting a lobotomy. I can't believe it. Yeah, it has a story, it does. The cinematics were awesome, but the story was so ass. I know, it really was.
Note combat
Bunny's
is a
ass,
common
though?
thread
Yeah.
between all of these recent failed experiments.
For sure.
Redfall's selection of identikit weapons didn't offer anywhere near the sort of malleable approaches that Dishonored's blades and powers brought to encounters. Although Marvel's Avengers heroes did each have a set of abilities intrinsically linked to their character, the rote defend and capture objective scenarios you were placed in.
I remember when this game paid every streamer, like, it paid streamers like hundreds, probably tens of millions of dollars to play it. And then as soon as everybody got done playing it, they immediately stopped playing the game. It's just amazing.
Offered limited thrills, and Anthem's mission design was near non-existent, as you jetted around its open world searching for any semblance of BioWare's famous quest writing. Rocksteady created one of the most influential combat systems in the form
Look at the style of this game, right? And this is what I'm saying, right? Is this game came out like 10 years ago or something like that. And the quality of this is just incredible. Look at the style, the graphics. There's nothing that's like overly flashy. It's not giving you a seizure. 2011, 2015, that's disgusting. How does this happen?
Batman Arkham's counter-based melee flow, and to step away from this and create a gun-based looter-shooter was a bold move. Sadly, it just didn't pay off. Each gun feels fundamentally very similar to the next and last, with interesting perks and alternate fires kept at a real premium. The least you'd expect from a looter-shooter is to have interesting loot to shoot with, but the focus on that in Suicide Squad just isn't quite there.
You're making guns for us now, Bird Brain.
It's your lucky day.
I'm all for developers.
I think that a lot of developers don't know how to make games that have interesting like combat decisions. I think that's why roguelikes. So I think a lot of developers should look at roguelikes and look at different builds people make in roguelikes and view those as power fantasies that they should develop into archetypes inside of a broader game. Like, look at what the baseline of that is, and then expand out from there. Like a garlic build, right? Or like, for example, like Bunny, for example, in First Descendant is really, really fun to play.
Trying something new in an attempt to avoid things becoming stale, but successful new beginnings are rooted in a recognition of historic strengths. I wish Rocksteady had used its previous top-tier melee combat, dense open world, and thrilling storytelling experience as a base, rather than shifting to what
they had an open world, they had the storytelling, and they had melee combat. It was just all trash. What are we talking about?
Is an almost entirely different development format. This challenge is something, to its
That looks
credit,
really nice.
that Sony has managed well with PlayStation Studios. Time is given to each creative team to make the project they want to make, with story-driven single-player games remaining a dominant focus. Naughty Dog has become the standard bearer for this philosophy in the years that Rocksteady spent making Kill the Justice League. But that isn't to say they didn't attempt to branch out to multiplayer in that time either, with Sony recently cancelling a stuttering The Last of Us online project. We'll never know how this would have turned out, but if recent history has told us anything, it's that halting development before it rumbles on for years might have been the right move by PlayStation.
Sometimes some babies deserve to get aborted. And every time that I hear about a game being canceled, I usually assume that it's the right decision.
Something confirmed by Naughty Dog itself in the statement announcing the cancellation. The studio said, "To release and support The Last of Us Online, we'd have to put all our studio resources behind supporting post-launch content for years to come, severely impacting development on future single-player games."
Yeah, it's a bad
so,
idea.
we had two paths in front of us, becoming a solely live service game studio, or continue to focus on single-player narrative games that have defined Naughty Dog's heritage.
Absolutely W statement. And this is what I'm saying, right? Is that they didn't do it. You listen to like what's the writing between the lines there? They said we could do this, but we don't want to do this. We're not going to chase a trend. We're going to do what we're good at, and that's what we're going to do. That's what it's going to be. Yeah, we're going to focus on what we're good at. Exactly. I still hate Neil Druckmann. I think he's so pretentious. He totally is, but that statement is accurate. It's good to read. And if Neil wants to keep making pretentious games and pretending to be like a Hollywood director, that's seemingly probably what he's best at. I bet he's probably better at that than doing looter shooter games that are live service. So keep doing it.
That's not to say that risks can't and shouldn't be taken though, if approached in a sensible and measured manner. Interesting results can come from developers stepping out of their comfort zone and trying something new and dipping their toes into the water before diving head first. In regards to PlayStation, Sucker Punch's Legends expansion to 2020's Ghost of Tsushima was a well-constructed online co-op offering rooted in its fundamentally exciting sword combat. The experience was scaled appropriately for an experimental DLC, offering a small but rewarding pool of gear for progressing through missions, which culminated in a challenging multi-part raid full of memorable art direction. The key though was that this focus was narrow, adding a handful of hours of multiplayer fun onto an already solid single player base.
I feel like that's kind of like what they did with like maybe Dragon in Dragon's Dogma 1, where they had like some like form of like pseudo asynchronous gameplay, and like there was some degree of grouping, but not really. I feel like this is something that's really cool for people that are really big fans of the game, but I don't really see this. I mean, I look at this gameplay, and if it's like any PvP or anything like that, it just looks like a worse version of Baraka Blade Point, right? Let's be honest. Devs had some fun. Yeah. I mean, if it's a fun thing to add in, I'm sure some people would like it.
Still want to see more Sucker Punch single-player stories, but this smaller scoped experiment has at least given me confidence that they can make the looter shooter live service jump where others have fallen. Maybe it would have been wise for Rocksteady to
just look, dude, this is what's so shocking to me about this. Is like, if I take a step back, looks fucking amazing. Oh my God. I'm sorry, but like, I bet that the people that made this didn't make Suicide Squad. It's a Ship of Theseus situation. There's no way they did. Well, I'm saying that a lot of the people, what I'm saying is that studios, this is a big issue that studios have, is that sometimes there's like a creative like brain drain, effectively, where a lot of the creative head people and the people that are like really defining these experiences leave the studio and they go somewhere else. It's hard to say, right? I mean, I can't be sure about that, but I think you see that happen with a number of studios where it's like, this studio used to be known as like the fucking gold standard and now it's the brown standard.
decided to test out some of Suicide Squad's online components in an Arkham Knight expansion, before fully implementing those ideas 9 years later. Unfortunately, it's still unclear to see how far those who leaped have fallen. It can't be a coincidence though, that these studios all find themselves reverting back to what made them such respected names in the single player space. BioWare is hoping to recapture.
I just think it's such cope to assume that Rocksteady is going to turn around and just make some amazing single player game after this. I can't see how a person would logically come to that conclusion. It doesn't make any sense to me.
To that story-driven RPG magic with new Dragon Age and Mass Effect games in development. Arcane has light at the end of the tunnel with Marvel's Blade being helmed by their Leon studio, a stealth combat game that hopes are high for. Crystal Dynamics finds its
Blade could be fucking amazing. Like, if Blade could be in between Splinter Cell and Devil May Cry, I don't know, that probably is maybe not the best combination, but Devil May Cry and something else that's a little bit more tactile, that could be really cool. That could be fucking amazing.
Self under the parasitic control of Embracer Group, who has seemingly done nothing but cancel projects and lay off staff since making their huge financial gamble. I hope the Tomb Raider studio manages to survive and thrive again. I sympathise with all these developers, none of whom set out to make games that would go on to be considered dead on arrival. Instead, eyes need to be turned towards those making the decisions, whether these be studio heads, publishers, or other executives, on what type of games these studios should make.
There's no executive that's sitting there that's telling them that you have to create this extremely annoying, really obnoxious and like weird to look at red style like surrounding thing on a character. Like, at a certain point you have to look at the individual decisions that are happening at like the second to second basis. I don't think that it's fair to say that the problem is all the executives and all of the people that are doing the programming are right about everything and doing everything correctly. I think that when you have this big of a failure, you have failure all the way down. I think this is a systematic issue that affects every single level of development. Now, the truth is that as leadership, it might not be their fault, but it's their responsibility. They're the ones who should get fired. And then they should bring in new people to take that responsibility. And then if there are people that are below them that are not fulfilling it, fire them and replace them with somebody who's good. So yeah, your Umbra programmers only do what's given as a requirement. Sure. Think about how delusional this sounds. The game would be great, except for the people that are programming it are being told to do everything wrong. And the people who are programming it would do everything right, but they're accidentally doing everything wrong because they're being told to. No, it's mistakes all the way down. Like every experience that I've ever seen in my life with any sort of like a systematic failure, it's always all the way down.
Studios should make. The list of previously mentioned failures to launch should be the wake-up call needed to stop mismanaging talent and siphoning their passion into projects that benefit neither the developer's skill sets nor the player's ultimate enjoyment. It's a lesson that Warner Brothers seemingly never learned with Kill the Justice League, although hopefully one they've now learned, considering Suicide Squad's questionable success comes not long after the news that WB's own Hogwarts Legacy, a single-player open-world story-driven game, happened to be 2023's biggest selling game.
I don't really think that that's a lot that you can say. Like, Hogwarts Legacy, I think, was a solid 8 out of 10 game, but it's capitalizing on one of the most popular IPs of all time, and I think it's doing so at the exact right time, where pretty much everybody who grew up watching Harry Potter has disposable income to buy a Harry Potter game. And so, like, if you really look at the success of Hogwarts Legacy, yeah, it was a great game, amazing game, but, I mean, that's it, right? I mean, a lot of there's a lot of things about the game that were not very good. Like, for example, like all the gameplay exploration, the monster density and monster variety, the bosses in the game, There were a lot of things that were just very, very below average with that game. I loved it. No, I thought it was a really fun game too. I played the entire thing, but I also have to admit that it's not perfect. It just needed to not be complete shit. Yeah. No, I think that the one thing the Hogwarts Legacy did extremely well is that it was such a... It was made for fans of Harry Potter. Like, the graphics and the design of Hogwarts specifically, fucking amazing.
Too soon to say what's
I think
next for
it's 8 out of 10.
Rocksteady, which still has the first steps of its live service roadmap to make when Joker arrives as a playable character next month. Suicide Squad could buck the trend, becoming a huge success that grows strong as the months and years go on. I have my doubts though. I just hope it does well enough that a studio home to so much single player talent is allowed to spread its bat wings again. For more on Suicide Squad, check out our review, and for everything else Kill the Justice League, stick with IGN.
I just think that it's crazy to think that the reason why this happened is because it was live service. The reason why it happened is because they were so creatively bankrupt, they didn't have their own direction, and they choose to lock on to a trend instead of embracing what they're good at, and they created garbage. A garbage game with a garbage story, with garbage gameplay, with garbage graphics, and guess what? Now it's in the garbage. That's what happens. So that's the way I see it. Journalist guys in co-op? Yeah, I mean, that's just how I see it. Yeah, so yeah, Suicide Squad is dead. The game is finally dead, and it killed itself. Big surprise. Please watch Ko's thoughts on Dragon Age. I know, he said pretty much the same thing. Will I read the PoE2 patch notes? Oh yeah, I'll look at all that stuff. Stupid ass logic, if you got bridge builders and tell them to build computers, is it their fault that the computer sucks? Well, they're not building, it's not building a bridge and building a computer. Like, spell effects and story design is irrelevant. Like, or sorry, it's the same. Like, you're writing a story in the same way. You're designing spell effects in the same way. There's no reason that it had to be designed with those color schemes. There's no reason it had to have that story. That's like saying, like, okay, if somebody's used to cake, you know, like cooking, you know, vanilla cakes, now they have to make a chocolate cake. Oh, wow, you can't expect them to do that. Yeah, you can. Yeah, I bet they can do that. It's like asking bridge builders to build a dam. They're civil engineers. Yeah, exactly. And programmers make bricks. Developers put the bricks into something to make a house. It's 100% visual design team's fault. What I'm saying is that everything about this game was wrong. And trying to assign the blame to live service, I think, is reductive. Everything about this was just fucking terrible. Like, look at this. What is this? It was a failure with everything. Everything about it was bad. So, yeah. And that's what I think. A chocolate game would sell, and they could eat it, and they can't... They'd cry. Yeah. The core problem is what you said. It was just made to make money and not have creative interest. Yeah. And so, Suicide Squad is dead, and not a moment too soon. Are AI advancements already slowing down?
AI breakthroughs have been a question of when, not if.
Google unveiling long-awaited new details about its large language model Gemini.
Claude 3, it is arguably now one of the most powerful AI models out there, if not the most powerful.
Preview, if you will, for us ChatGPT 5.
I expect it to be a significant leap forward.
But what if that core assumption that models can only keep getting bigger and better is now fizzling?
Is there really a slowing in progress because that wasn't expected?
It could spell cracks in the NVIDIA bull story.
We're increasing GPUs at the same rate.
It was obvious that NVIDIA was massively overvalued. Anybody could have seen that. A company being overvalued doesn't mean that AI is bad.
But we're not getting the intelligence improvements out of it.
Calling into question the gigantic
And also,
ramp.
you keep in mind that NVIDIA is undervalued at probably the lowest point in their product offering cycle. Like, they're going to bring out a 5090 at some point. It's going to happen. And then the stock is going to go up, probably.
Been spending from Amazon, Google, Microsoft. A rush for tangible use cases and a killer app.
January, who knows?
I'm Deirdre Bosa with the Tech Check Take. Has AI progress peaked?
AI performance anxiety? Oh, God.
Call it performance anxiety. The growing concern in Silicon Valley that AI's rapid progression is losing steam.
We've really slowed down in terms of the amount of improvement.
Reached a ceiling and is now slowing down.
In the pure model competition, the question is, when do we start seeing a asymptote to scale?
Hitting walls that even the biggest players, from OpenAI to Google, can't seem to overcome. Progress didn't come cheap. Billions of dollars invested to keep pace, banking on the idea that returns, they would be outsized too. But no gold rush is guaranteed to last, and early signs of struggle are now bubbling up at major AI players.
I think that the other big issue is that as soon as any new technology comes out, and this is what happened with NFTs, it's what happened with crypto, and it's what happened with AI, and it's also what happened with the internet. Basically, like, you had a massive, kind of market, like a readjustment, because everybody puts their money into this. Everybody thinks it's going to go fucking, to the moon, and then it doesn't. Yeah, you need time to play out. Exactly. Yeah, you have a market reset. And so, just because something's experiencing a market reset, because people are just investing more money thinking that, it was just going to multiply by 10x, it doesn't necessarily mean that the industry's bad.
First indication that things are turning, the lack of progression between models.
I expect that the delta between 5 and 4 will be the same as between 4 and 3.
Each new generation of OpenAI's flagship GPT models, the ones that power ChatGPT, they have been exponentially more advanced than the last in terms of their ability to understand, generate, and reason. But according to reports, that's not happening anymore.
There was...
Well, maybe one of the reasons why it's not happening anymore is the same reason why video game graphics aren't getting that much better anymore. It's because it's already very good. You can't make 20% advancements when you're already 90% of the way there. Like, the AI is already very good. So, like, fine-tuning and making that better and, like, making it approach, like, a simulated human experience, you're going to have... It's kind of like in a video game, right? Where you have diminishing returns, or like the old 80-20 rule, where you make 80% of your progress in 20% of your time, and you spend the other 80% of your time making the remaining 20% of the progress. Almost everything follows a function like this.
Talk prior to now that these companies were just going to train on bigger and bigger and bigger systems. If it's true that it's top, that's not going to happen anymore.
OpenAI has led the pack in terms of advancements. Its highly anticipated next model, called Orion, it was expected to be a groundbreaking system that would represent a generational leap in bringing us closer to AGI, or artificial general intelligence. But that initial vision, it's now being scaled back. Employees who have used or tested Orion told the information that the increase in quality was far smaller than the jump between GPT-3 and 4, and that they believed Orion isn't reliably better than its predecessor at handling certain tasks like coding.
To put in perspective, remember, ChatGPT came out at the end of 2022. So now it's been, close to 2 years. And so you had initially a huge ramp up in terms of what all these new models can do. And what's happening now is you've really trained all these models, and so the performance increases are kind of leveling off.
The same thing may be happening.
It obviously is going to level off. Like, you think about the difference in graphics quality between the Super Nintendo and, like, the N64, and the N64 to the GameCube, and then look at the difference between the Wii U to the Switch. Not that big of a difference.
At other leading AI developers. The startup Anthropic, it could be hitting roadblocks to improving its most powerful model, the Opus, quietly removing wording from its website that promised a new version of Opus later this year. And sources telling Bloomberg that the model didn't perform better than the previous versions as much as it should, given the size of the model and how costly it was to build and run. These are startups focused on one thing, the development of large language models with billions...
Focused on one thing, getting people to invest in their startup. That's what they're focused on. Getting more people to give them money.
Of dollars.
Let's be honest.
Backing from names like Microsoft and Amazon and venture capital. But even Google, which has enough cash on hand to buy an entire country, it may also be seeing progress plateau.
The current generation of LLM models are roughly, few companies have converged at the top. But I think we're all working on our next versions too. I think the progress is going to get harder. When I look at 25, the low-hanging fruit is gone. The curve, the hill is steeper.
Its principal AI model, Gemini, is already playing catch-up to OpenAI and Anthropic's. Now Bloomberg reports, quoting sources, that an upcoming version is not living up to internal expectations.
It has to make
Probably set expectations too high. That's the issue. Google has the worst AI model. I mean, like, for me, the AI almost always delivers accurate answers, but I think it's going to be different for everyone.
Think, okay, are we going to go through a period here where we're going to need to digest all this hundreds of billions of dollars we've spent on AI over the last couple of years, especially if revenue forecasts are getting cut or not changing, even though you're increasing the spending you're doing on AI.
The trend has even been confirmed by one of the most widely respected and pioneering AI researchers, Ilya Sutskever, who co-founded OpenAI and raised $1 billion seed round for his new AI startup.
As you scale up retraining...
There it is, $1 billion. That's a lot of fucking money.
A lot of the low-hanging fruit was plucked.
Do you think that the censorship of AI kind of caused the problem? I do think that... So people want an AI to work the way that they want the AI to work. They don't want to have some nerd in California making the rules for what you can tell the AI to do or not do. It's like when you buy a hammer in, you know, in Home Depot, you don't want them to, you know, like tell you how you can and can't use the hammer. AI is simply a tool. So if you don't let people use the tool in the way that they want, well, then you're going to have a lot of people get angry. Tell a racist joke, exactly. Because people have no use and no interest in having an AI that's just going to feed them propaganda and not tell them what the truth is. The entire function of AI is so you can understand what's going on in the world. So if the AI isn't creating that outcome, then the AI is useless. It's that simple.
And so it makes sense to me that you're seeing a deceleration in the rate of improvement.
It's like, for example, like imagine how unpopular Photoshop would be if it could automatically detect that you're using copyrighted images and then not allow you to edit or modify them. Like nobody would ever use Photoshop. It would have never popped off. So like you can't do that. That's not the function of AI. It's a bastardization of AI is used outside of science. Yeah, sure.
Everyone agrees the rate of progress has peaked.
Foundation model pre-training scaling is intact, and it's continuing. You know, as you know, this is an empirical law, not a fundamental physical law. But the evidence is that it continues to scale.
Nothing I've seen in the field is you know, out of character with what I've seen over the last 10 years or leads me to expect that things will slow down.
There's no evidence that the scaling laws, as they're called, have begun to stop. They will eventually stop, but we're not there yet.
And even Sam Altman posting simply, there is no wall. OpenAI and Anthropic, they didn't respond to requests for comment. Google says it's pleased with its progress on Gemini and has seen meaningful performance gains and capabilities like reasoning and coding.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
Let's get to the why.
I feel like this is always what's happened. Like, think about for video quality on YouTube, for example. Video quality on YouTube and video quality on the internet pretty much peaked about 10 years ago. Like, as soon as we hit 1080p, everything else after that was kind of just icing on the top. It's not the same. Yeah, 4K. Yeah, but 4K isn't a big enough. So this is the difference. 4K theoretically is much better. But I don't think it's that big of a difference for most people. It's really not. It's the human eye's limitations. Exactly. You don't need 4K to play a video game.
If progress is in fact plateauing, it has to do with scaling laws. The idea that adding more compute power and more data guarantees better models to an infinite degree. In recent years, Silicon Valley has treated this as religion.
One of the properties of machine learning, of course, is that the larger the brain, the more data we can teach it, the smarter it becomes. We call it the scaling law. There's every evidence that as we scale up the size of the models, the amount of training data, the effectiveness, the quality, the performance of the intelligence
Why is the bottom
improves.
flashing?
In other words, all you need to do is buy more NVIDIA GPUs, find more articles or YouTube videos or research papers to feed the models, and it's guaranteed to get smarter. But recent development suggests that may be more theory than law.
People call them scaling laws. That's a misnomer, like Moore's law.